Welcome, fam. Oh boy. My name's Krimic. Lex. Sometimes CaitSidheCrim. Sometimes Krimic Light. A lot of things. A lot of things all at once. And today, as you can see from this lovely image here, I'm ranking my... I'm going through my 200 favorite albums. So for those who don't know, every August for the past, 4 years, I've done a countdown of sorts where I like to rank, my top 22 of something, because 22 is my favorite number. I started it when I was 22. My birthday's on August 22nd, so I would count down from the start of August into August 22 of my top 22, whatever. It's normally game related. And they've, I've always kind of tried to one-up myself in terms of the effort I put into the project. They've recently become like a video series. Because of a lot of shit going on in my life, because of a lot of, busy, struggling, just with some mental struggles and everything, it just really didn't come together. But I wanted to do something. I still want to do something counter-related. I know it's already September, but that's okay. So this time I'm going to just do a live stream talking about music, because music is my other big media passion alongside games. Those are my two favorite things two favorite media to consume is music and games. But albums to me, on their own, are a little bit smaller scale than a full game, so I didn't want to just rank my top 22 albums. I listen to so much music, felt like I could easily go 100. And then 100 was too easy, so I'm like, fuck it, we'll do top 200, why not? So here we are going to be counting down my top 200 albums today. I love music. I love just, being able to put on an album at any time of the day. I'm almost always listening to music when I can, and you'll get a flavor for what my favorite types of music are as the list goes on, but for the most part, I do listen to basically everything. I can find enjoyment in most things, but there will be a pattern. Lots of, prog, industrial, electronic, that sort of thing will sneak in there, but there are some exceptions, there are some outliers, and there are some amalgams of other sorts of genres that we'll find in here. It's still keeping with the 22 theme, because there are 22 honorable mentions, because I always have fucking honorable mentions here. There are 22 honorable mentions, and that kind of means that there's 222 albums that will be shown off in this slideshow here today. So I'm still kind of one-upping myself, I think. I'm just using a little photo carousel that I found built in Django. I modified a bunch off of GitHub, so thanks GitHub. But I might turn this down just a bit more. But oh no! And it also will go automatically if I take my mouse off the screen. It will stop running. But anyway, this is just gonna be a live stream. It's gonna be a chill live stream where I get to talk about music, because I love talking about things I like. That's kind of been the whole premise of this countdown. A couple of things before, obviously, A, all my opinion. B, I have not listened to everything ever. There's probably picks that would go on here that I just have never listened to. I haven't listened to many people's favorite albums, but I feel like I listen to a lot. I listen to more than most. I think that's fair. I listen to more than most. But it's my opinion. If you disagree, hell yeah. If you think something should have been on here, hell yeah, that's awesome. But this is my list. There is no album from 2022 on the list proper. Just for recency bias, 2021 is the latest, is the most recent that an album made the list prior. There are a couple honorable mentions that are from 2022, but beyond that, strictly 2021 or earlier in top 200. Soundtracks. There are a few soundtracks you know, I don't just like, I don't, I like to listen to video game music once in a while, like, you know, a soundtrack can really make or break a game for me, and there are a few instances of that. There are some cases where some of my favorite soundtracks are just not on here because they have to work as an album. That's the key thing. Like, if it's like one of my favorite soundtracks, but it's just too like bulky, there's too much filler in there, there's no isolated album version of a OST, then it's probably not going to be on here. Things like, you know, some of my all-time favorites like Xenoblade, any Xenoblade game, East 8 isn't gonna be on here. Even like Ori and the Blind Forest, most Zelda tracks, most Zelda soundtracks. Nier Automata was a bit too long. That's not going to get on here. But you get the picture. They really have to feel like an album that just happens to be the soundtrack to a video game. But there are some instances on there. But I think all that being said, let's start. Let's get right into this, shall we? I just want to make sure. Yeah, I think that mixing's fine. But let's get right into it with my first honorable mention. This is Compassion by Forest Swords. Forest Swords is just such a great ambient, breezy listening, almost kind of housey in their design. Was thinking of putting it on the list proper, but there's just kind of a little bit too much of that. I think that there's a lot that Compassion does that another album that we'll get to that made the list proper does just a little bit better. But for now, I can wholeheartedly recommend Compassion, especially as an intro to the genre. Cosmogramma by Philo is become kind of this classic, big 2010s soul electronic beat that really took off, and I'm glad for it because Philo is an exceptional artist, a talented DJ, and I think it comes together right here. It doesn't quite have like the flow and the peaks that I love in an album like this, but it's definitely, like, I think worthy of the praise it gets. Foxtrot by Genesis. Foxtrot is... Genesis, I think... To me, I don't get as much out of Genesis, at least not with, like, their entire discography compared to most people. I do prefer the Gabriel era to the Collins era, and that's my prog showing. I really could only pick one Genesis album to go on the list proper, and that unfortunately meant Foxtrot got the shaft. I think it's a little bit too subtle in certain ways. It doesn't really quite give me that rock prog energy that I really think Genesis nails when they go all in. But still, it's a very solid album, one I thoroughly enjoy every time I put on. Wholeheartedly deserves being an honorable mention. Here we go, our first video game soundtrack, and it is Volume Alpha by C418. The first volume of the Minecraft soundtrack, and come on, it's ambient grooves at their finest. It's so relaxing, it's so emotional despite being primarily piano. It's something that fits so well within the relaxing survival world of Minecraft. I love it to pieces. Can always put it on while working, can put it on while playing anything, especially Minecraft. So it's just a fantastic soundtrack. Rubber Soul by the Beatles. One Beatle album made the cut here. No, there are two Beatles albums in the list proper, but Rubber Soul is my third favorite. I think it has a lot of good quality tracks on there that just not quite the cohesion that I like within the albums that are featured in the list proper, but it's still great. I love Rubber Soul. Bilateral by Leprous. So I'm a big Leprous fan, and I really, and you'll see the censor. I'm not taking any chances with this being on Twitch. No titties on stream. But I'm a big Leprous fan, and I really had to just kind of limit myself to 3 albums. But I know that sounds like a lot. I'm limiting myself to 3 albums here. Leprous. Bilateral is one of them. It's the first one I listened to by them and introduced me into the band, so I obviously have so much respect for them, but it really was down to... The third pick was either down to this or Aphelion. Aphelion's their most recent effort. And until very recently, it was going to be Aphelion to get the honorable mention shaft. But we'll speak the praises of that. I realized I just love that album too much, but Bilateral still has a lot going for it, especially in the first half. fantastic prog metal album that is, you know, I think was great for its place in time. You know, this was kind of the peak of the prog metal vibe they were going for at the time. Not their best prog metal album, because we'll get to that, but for what they wanted at the time, they nailed it. They did amazing. Volition by Protest the Hero. So I really wanted to get into Protest the Hero. I really did, and I really wanted to get into Volition. I just can't. I can't. It's hard for me to get through the whole album without wanting to switch it off. It loses interest a lot of way through. Why isn't it even an HM then? Because the thing is, Protest the Hero or Volition has like 2 or 3 of my like favorite songs ever are on this. I will sing like single out specific songs, things like Plato's Triparrot, etc. Just fantastic compositions, fantastic pieces, and I love them so much. Just the album as a whole, I don't get much on it, so it's relegated to an HM spot. But still, they've got their peaks are top tier. Celeste, our next soundtrack by Lena Raine. A fantastic work. This, like, Celeste is such a masterpiece of, you know, the rare, almost unique perfection when you mix, like, 10 out of 10 gameplay with a 10 out of 10, like, emotional presentation. And that part of that presentation is its soundtrack. It is a phenomenal soundtrack. Weighing in so much emotion and energy, complementing every little bit, every little scene, every little moment. It's just, I love it. Can never get tired of it. I wanted to... Yes, alright. We'll talk about King Gizzard in 1 second, but I wanted to quickly, because I don't actually have the list up in front of me, and I wanted to put it up in front of me. No, we'll get to that. We'll get to you. Come on, this is the thing, is it went on its own and I don't like it. Infest the Rat's Nest by King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. This is probably their best, more metal-sounding album, and I do really enjoy it. I think it's got some great vibes, got some great just... I love, like, the lyrical chops, and it's weird to say that about King Gizzard because it seems so kind of washed out in their killer instrumentals, but I love how aggressive this one is. I love how they transition into more of a metal sound based on what I liked previously in some of their better works, but for me, it just wasn't quite enough. It just didn't have enough cohesion together. I still preferred their earlier garage rock style over Infest, but still a fantastic effort here. Okay, so the thing is, Linkin Park is a mixed bag for me. Nu metal is a mixed fucking bag for me, because the thing is, like, the rapping in nu metal always sounds so corny to me, especially Linkin Park. Like, I love Chester Bennington, R.I.P., fantastic vocalist, and he, like, carries Linkin Park for me, because as soon as, like, the rap beats in Linkin Park songs hit, it just sucks me out entirely, and I feel like obviously there are really only two... Most would argue there are really only 2 amazing Linkin Park albums, and so I only put the better one on the list proper. And you know which one that is, but Hybrid Theory will get the shaft on HM. I don't think it's as solid. I think I get sucked up by the rap beats too much. There are some great tracks on it that I do love and hold dear to my heart, but man, this is it's just, I get sucked out too much to put it on the list prior. But Linkin Park will have, I did have to put the best one. I had to put the best Linkin Park on the ranking, and sue me. Alright, now one by Gianni. Gianni, I love where she took this album. This is her most recent project, her most recent album. I Hate People on the Internet. Fantastic, just chaotic mess, like electro pop on crack. It's nuts. I love it. Feels like I'm listening to, you know, bees in a pop microphone. It's great. Only problem, it's 20 minutes long. And that, alongside the recency bias, I really can't put it on the list proper. But if there's like a full-fledged album full of stuff like this, then I'm looking forward to it, Gianni. In Rainbows for Radiohead, only put 2 Radiohead albums on the list proper. In Rainbows, I I get what they're going for. To me, it's just like, okay, I'd rather listen to OK Computer, but I really like OK Computer. So to me, this is still just a very solid album with a lot that I love to listen to on it. I think that there's plenty of tracks to enjoy. I think there's plenty of pieces to this arrangement that will stay with me. I could go back to listening to Rainbows anytime and have a good time, but it's just, it needs a little bit more to push it onto the list proper. Aha! Alright, so I am a complete sucker for anything Darren Korb puts out. All of his OSTs to me are exceptional, they're phenomenal, and when I, made this list made a preliminary list, 3 of these soundtracks are on here, but I realized I couldn't do that. I couldn't clog this up with Supergiant games. So every Supergiant game OST is an honorable mention, except one. I picked one. All 4 of them are on this image because I like this image, but one did make the list proper, and we will get to that. Yushimi battles the Pink Robots by the Flame Lips. I'm not the biggest Flame Lips fan, but this is my favorite one of theirs. This one I will listen to all the time. It helped me a lot through college. It was on the rotation quite a bit. I love the thematics. I love the overarching sort of pseudo concept album thing they got going. It's weird, but the sounds are great. Like the electronic mix with alt rock is just that, it touches my soul. I love this one. Alright, I'm a big Newgrounds boy. I loved the Newgrounds audio portal growing up. Waterflame was always my favorite, and he helped me through a lot in high school, and he doesn't have a lot of... He's mostly been working on soundtracks and stuff, but he had a couple albums that he just kind of released of a lot of his audio portal music. So just in honor of that phase of my life and how he helped me, I'm putting on this Community Favorites, which is a longer, kind of a double album of greatest hits. It's great. I love this album. It's banging. There's so many beats and bops on it that just, make me so nostalgic. I could listen to back then, enjoy them, and listen to them now and still enjoy them. So it's great. The original Gorillaz. So this is... There was a time, a couple years ago, this would have been my favorite Gorillaz album. Because I was initially not as down for the Guess. I was not as down for that sort of style. And I was more into just Damon Albarn doing his thing. But then I kind of grew more into Blur and saw that was more what Blur was for. And I've grown to like the guest stars, the special guests, and the collaborations era of Gorillaz alongside the more soulful hip-hop beats that have come with that. But I still love this album. It still serves a place in my heart. It's been relegated to now probably my 4th favorite Gorillaz album, so it's fallen off a bit. But there are some bangers on here, dude. 2001, Tomorrow Comes Today, even like Clint Eastwood I'll still listen to. It's so good. But it has unfortunately been relegated to the HM slot. Pandora by SIM. So SIM, I think, is most known for being some kind of for their anime openings, basically. They recently got big off of The Rumbling, which was the second OP off of the final season of Attack on Titan, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that no one I know really listened to their actual albums. And Pandora's, I think, their first. But it's the one that stuck out to me because it's just a great album. It's a great album on its own. I don't know if it's been used, if any of the songs have been taken to be used in any animes or anything like that. But I love this album. Great electronic, industrial, hardcore beats. Fantastic mixing. Solid production, which I didn't really expect. But I really enjoy this album, and I'd recommend it to anyone. From a Basement on the Hill by Elliott Smith. This is my favorite Elliott Smith album. Not, huge fan, but I definitely appreciate what he did, what he brought to the table, the sort of music that he was able to create, and how many hearts he touched with it. This is my favorite one, the posthumous one. I think it's just such a great compilation of everything he's able to do, a great showcase, and a tasteful send-off. I think it's a wonderful album. Alright, so this is my pretentious pick, and that's why it's only an honorable mention. This, you're like, oh, come on, you're really putting Everywhere at the End of Time here. Yeah, it's an honorable mention because I do think it's art. I do think it means a lot. Don't listen to it if you're depressed. The memes are true. Like, please don't listen to this if you're sad. Don't listen to this if you're depressed. Listen to this if you're like ready to handle like grief. If you're ready to be okay with that side of like emotion, then listen to Everywhere at the End of Time. Because it's an experience, it's a journey to go through this, to experience the message, the underlying message about mental illness and dementia and Alzheimer's. And it's just such this inescapable feeling, but I'm glad I took it. I've only listened to it once. 6 hours long, and I listened to it once. I'm sorry. But I got to appreciate it. I think it's art. Yoshida Kyodai. I love the shamisen. Fucking Japanese-ass banjo sounds goddamn amazing. I love the shamisen. I think the Yoshida brothers are one of the best examples of mainstream shamisen, and I think this is a good collection of them. Volume 2, you'll probably recognize a couple tracks on it, but this is such an easy listen to that I think it's a great introduction to shamisen. It's fantastic. Check it out. Distant Satellites by Anathema. I think similar to Leprous, I only allowed 3 Anathemas because they're one of my favorite bands, probably top 5. And that meant Distant Satellites had to get the shaft, but I still really like this album. I think it's one of the only 2 Anathema albums I actually have on vinyl. And it's great. It's so ambient. It's great for like a party listen to just put in the background. Great for just hanging out. I think it's just a little like a hair shyer than what I think is their big like progressive pop tetralogy. I think it's just it does its job just a little bit worse, I think. I think I have 4 Anathemas on here now, and I think about it. This is the 5th one, so the 5th one got kind of the shaft. Because I think like they all kind of blend together, except I think this one is just a little bit, its peaks are a little bit lower, and it's got some valleys. I would probably press the skip on this one, and I don't think I would with the rest of the New Prague tetralogy that they have. And finally, the last HM is the most recent Porcupine Tree album that came out about two months ago. I've only been liking this album more and more. I was a little bit hesitant at first, but it feels like a mixture of both PT and current Steven Wilson. This feels like a great evolution of Steven Wilson's current material into the Porcupine Tree with that phenomenal production, phenomenal instrumentals from the PT band minus Colin Edwin, Miss You Bud. He's not dead, he's just, they didn't bring him back, unfortunately. But I've only grown to like this album more and more from my favorite band, who I'm seeing in like 2 weeks, which I'm very much looking forward to. If I had to rank it in terms of like my favorite out of like Porcupine Tree albums, it would probably be like 7th, which doesn't sound too 7th out of like 11, which doesn't sound too great. Until you remember that the 6 above it are on the list proper. So that should tell you a bit about this album and how much I love this album, or how much I love this band. But I think with that, we are going to start the list proper about half an hour in. Welcome to number 200. We have The Greater Wrong of the Right by Skinny Puppy. And I think a lot of old heads, slow industrial heads, don't like this album because I think they said it took Skinny Puppy in a new, different direction that went against what made them fans. But to me, I really like this album. I really like how it modernized it for the mid-aughts. I really like how it still kept a lot of industrial roots, as well as just kind of standing on its own too. Like, there's nothing quite like this album, I feel, and to me that makes it stand out whenever I decide to put it on. So I admire it for what it is. I greatly enjoy like 3/4 of it. And I think, to me, it's the most standout Skinny Puppy has been, so it made the list. Leading us into 199, Nuit Noir by Lost in Kiev. This is a very unknown one, and I'm surprised no one has ever heard of this band, but I think this album is a great start. It's a great, just easy breezy, heavy metal sort of album that really takes me on this journey every time. Love it. Great stuff. Magic Night by the Violet Cold. So if you've never gotten into black metal, I think Violet Cold is probably a good entry point if you want to actually get into the proper black metal sort of thing, where it's you know, subtle underscored screaming with the just grinding fast tempo of a guitar. I love this album, and I think there's so many good soundscapes from it. Like the soundscapes from black metal and black gaze are just some of my favorite things in music, and I think Violet Cold is one of the best examples of that. Especially the title track. No, the opener on this. Whatever you imagine is real. Whatever you imagine is real is, I believe, the title of it on Magic Knight. Fantastic track. Dynatron by Escape Velocity. My chill, spacey, ambient electronic will be shining through a lot here. Escape Velocity is probably my favorite Dynatron. I think there's just a lot of nice tracks on here. Great for working in the background. Got me through a lot of assignments. Can't complain much about it. Angel Falls by Secusio. So everyone, I think, has their own little branch of independent, YouTube artists that they like to listen to, and I like Secusio. Secusio, great vibes of just goes from, pure like electronic chaos into like raw anime-esque, fight music. It's great. It's so much fun. I love Angel Falls, and I think there's a good variety on it too. Also the production. The production is phenomenal for being like one dude. I love it. Elysium by the Fields of the Nephilim. This is by Fields of the Nephilim, a band created by one of the members of Dead Can Dance, I believe. And this is more of an actual rock album, but still kind of having that eerie ambient vibes that I think make Dead Can Dance work so well. And it really impressed me here. I don't have much to complain about Elysium. Dive by Tycho, phenomenal house music here. Not quite house, but ambient electronic. There's a lot of ambient electronic down here at the bottom, but love Dive, love Tycho. Probably my favorite Tycho album still. As it just, all worries kind of wash away with this. This is probably one of the latest albums on this list, but it's Dive. I'm not gonna argue too much with Dive, Dive being on here, I love it. Hunky Dory is my favorite David Bowie album because of the singles on it. Songs like what? You can tell I'm a David Bowie fan. Whoops. Yeah. Things like Changes, Life on Mars, that sort of thing, just to me is really what I love about Bowie are those kind of tracks. Belting out ballads, great instrumentals in the backgrounds. I love the style of it. Yeah, I like just a hair more than Ziggy Stardust. Salome by Marriages, fantastic, ambient folk rock. I love the neo folk on this. Just the airy guitars in the background, hypnotic vocals. Oh, it is easy to get sucked into this one. It's great. Miracle by Blackmill, a little bit more of a heavy, almost not quite dubsteppy, but definitely a little bit more of a trance, a little bit more of electronic that I think was big, 10 years ago. Kind of fallen out of favor now, but I do like this. I do think that this album has held up a bit. Doolittle by the Pixies. I love this album because it's go on Spotify for this album, and I love how it's the only song with hundreds of millions of views. Clearly, the most popular song is the most pop rocky single. It's the one made for the radio, and it's so hilarious because it's a very dark album. It talks about a lot of dark things thematically, sonically, and I love every part of it except that single because I just it's almost kind of satirical how poppy that is, but I love the rest of it. I think it's just chaotic early 90s rock. It's great. And Eternal Lines, kind of this hodgepodge of it almost looks like a production album, it was meant for various soundtracks, but it was kind of just all spliced together into this chaotic album. It's really hard to describe. I don't know what genre I'd put it in. I'd put it in this. It's mostly electronic rock, but it's also ambient. It's also there's also some like solid rock ballads on here. There's some guest stars that are like really good. It's hard to describe, but I love this album. Selected ambient works 85 through 92 by Aphex Twin. Oh man, we're already getting here. Yeah. To me, this is still... I like a lot of the, you know, the drum and bass stuff on the Richard D. James album is great. A lot of the throwbacks on Cyro is great. But for me, this is... Like, I'll always come back to this one from Aphex Twin. I think that this one, just to me, it's so easy to listen to. It's so kind of ahead of its time, really. Like, 92. Well, yeah, 92 was released. That still sounds superb today. I know a lot of what I've listened to is, like, remastered versions. But, like, man, like, can't imagine, like, vibing to this in, like, a 90s living room. And it would sound phenomenal. I love it. Seven Thunders Roar by Stone Jesus. This is some good stoner metal. That is just like... I love the sort of shoegazy stoner metal vibe where it just gets so... Like, guitars become kind of ambient. Alongside very passionate vocals over on top. It is great. I love it. Encore by Kitty Kafka. So this is a big, like, this is more of like a raw, chill trap album. And I think it's good. I think it's very good. I don't think there's too much special. I think it's a very solid, good album, but there's a lot of personal significance for me. I discovered this album at like a very, very hard time in my life where I was directionless, I was sad, there was a lot of shit going on in my life, and like for some reason, like 8 or 9 times out of 10 when I was like waking up, going to work, feeling depressed, I would just like put this album on, and it would help me wake up, help me, you know, start my day, help me ease into life again, and that meant so much to me. And I think it's still a good album. It's just, you know, to me that's why it's special. It's because it really was there for me. Worlds Collide. Apocalyptica is, you know, kind of what you see is what you get. It's like in metal. It's an orchestral metal band, kind of one of the first to do it back in like the early 2000s. And I like them, and I think this is their best album. So I felt like it deserved a spot on here. Trilogy by Carpenter Brute, I think also deserves a spot on here, just because there's so much. It's long, but you know, when it's good, when the good tracks hit, like, this is some prime, you know, synth, some good dark synth, and I love good dark synth. So, we'll put Trilogy on there. Worlds by Porter Robinson, you know, similar, this was kind of, you know, product of its time, on the rage when it hit me big in college when everyone was listening to it, and I still think there were a lot of banger tracks on here, but to me there was just some, like, solid, tasteful, classy electronic music that really hit hard. I'm not, like, I feel kind of Worlds is these days kind of this guilty pleasure, and I'm like, why? There's so many good tracks on Worlds. It was, like, a lot of fun. That, to me, was just easy put on whenever my friends were hanging out. Great stuff. I still will enjoy, you know, like Sad Machine or Divinity. Fellow Feeling is one of my favorite electronic songs, like, period. It's a great album. Empress of Me. Great pop album. I love, like, a good electronic pop album when it's super tasteful and classy. We'll see a couple of them on here. But, like, to me, this is great. I love, like, how catchy the production was. To me, you gotta have catchy production on pop. If you have catchy production on pop, I'm pretty sold. And Empress of like killed it here. Great, catchy vocals, enjoyable vocals, fun production that, you know, I could listen to either on their own, the vocals, their production, and enjoy it, and together they're just great. Rumors. Rumors is a big nostalgia album to me. I listened to a lot growing up. I am just like a Lindsey Buckingham fan in general, so just hearing his voice and guitar playing wins me over most of the time. But, you know, I think, you know, Rumors was popular for a reason. Go Your Own Way The Chain is one of my favorite songs. Fantastic stuff. I think it's just a very solid, you know, breezy rock album that, you know, if you don't like, you don't like, but if you like, yeah, there's a reason for that. It's good. That was very dumb. That was a very poor way of putting it. Oh, Silent Shout is great. This is a great album. Wonderful vibes from it. The Knife is such a unique electronic vibe. I really enjoy what The Knife puts out, just in terms of their energy. It almost seems so like outsider. It seems so like they just didn't take I know they did, obviously, but it feels like it's so isolated on their own. Like they're in their own genre, and I love that. I think Silent Shout is their best example of that. Such a cool listen. It's such a, like, especially your first time listening to it, such a cool album. The Black Wayne by Anwise, also a very, you know, on its own, out there, unique electronic album that stands alone. Great stuff. Especially, like, I listened to this a lot just, like, while I was in, like, a lecture. I would listen to the Black Rain in the background. It was so good. Blackfield 1. Definitely the Steven Wilson's art rock outlet before he transitioned to a lot of that in his solo album. And that's what I argue with people, is like, while I do obviously prefer the heavier vibes Steven doles out, when people are like, why are you all of a sudden doing art rock or progressive pop with your new stuff? You've never done that before. And I'm like, he kind of did. I mean, he just kind of had an outlet for that that had less of a name on it, and that was Blackfield. And I really like Blackfield. I think Blackfield 1 has a lot of great tracks on it. I think that it's where he was able to let loose that sort of the power of the single, power of the 4-minute song, power of the poppy art rock track that he really couldn't do with Porcupine Tree, especially at the time. And I think I do prefer the second one. I think that's a better blend of art rock and progressive rock, and relates to a lot of his I think you refine that style a little further in the solo album, in his solo career. But on its own, I think Blackfield 1 is a great first effort from Aviv and Steven. Great stuff. Okay, there's a lot of, you know, chill ambience down here at the bottom. I love this one. Kind of a mix of little ambience with dark synth. Great stuff. I'm fooling with a tape roll, by the way. But this is a great vibe. I think I've just kind of been a little bit repetitive with the genre, so we'll move on, but I do recommend Undergrowth. In Count of Venom. So I always have wanted to get into Opeth because I love their instrumentals. I'm just not a fan of screaming vocals. I much prefer clean vocals, even in metal, especially in metal. And so it's like, oh, you should check out Damnation by Opeth. And I did, and I love Damnation. We'll get to it. But I remember people being fans of the genre, fans of Opeth, being pissed when they seemed like they were consistently going in a clean vocal direction, starting with Sorceress, which was eh. I have my gripes with that. There's a couple tracks I love, but it's definitely not a great album. Not a great album is harsh, but it's not a fantastic album. But I think they refined it. They came back even better, brought back a lot of what made Damnation work, brought back a lot of what makes prime Opeth work. In Count of Venom, fantastic album. I've been loving it. Probably will shoot up a couple more spots as time goes on, but I love this album for what it is. And here we go, the best Linkin Park album. So Meteora is, I genuinely really like this album. As I said with Hybrid Theory, when the rap beats kick, when it gets too new metally, I can be sucked out of it. It's a little corny. But man, when it's hitting, like, some of the production on this, like the production on, like, Don't Stay, Faint, Numb, all of that, like, the beats and the instrumental of that are just masterful, or so iconic. And Chester's vocals are amazing. Like, Breaking the Habit on its own, like, carries. It's so good. There's a lot to enjoy on this. Unfortunately, just, like, its lows are, like, low for me. So it's a little bit low on the list. But, oh, man, when it's hitting. no shame in saying Meteor hits when it does. Speaking of album that hits when it's on point, XYZ by Igloo Ghost, and I believe this was kind of a collab album with Igloo Ghost and some of their friends. But for me, this is another wild, like kind of electro-poppy. I want to kind of pull up the Wikipedia article for it, because I know that there's like definitely. No, this one doesn't even have an article on its own. So I'm going to say, yeah, it's a lot of bubblegum electronic, bubblegum bass, experimental, glitchy, but somehow still like feels cohesive, and everything still kind of flows into the next. Wonderful album. Utilizes their guest performers and instrumentalists well, I think. And I listen to this, like, I can listen to this on repeat. I've listened to this like twice in a row just by accident, so I can always relate to XYZ. Act 5, Hymns of the Devil and Confessional. Not Deer Hunter's best, but close. We'll get to their best. But to me, spoilers. Come on. But to me, Act 5, Hymns of the Devil and Confessional, is the closest I've ever come to understanding musical theater. It's not even... There's no theater portion to this. There is a concept around all the acts. There is a story, an overarching story. But I hate musical theater. I can't stand musicals. I really don't like musicals. But this has like that kind of energy that I think works well in a musical. I feel like it's a lot of the ballads are being conveyed as if they're describing a play in the background. And it's so catchy. It's so easy to get through. It's so much. It's not just easy. It's fun. It's so much fun to get through. And to me, yeah, I got that energy. I never liked the musical theater energy. This one almost convinced me, almost. But Act 5 is great. Romantic Warrior. This is, oh my god. I'm a big Return to Forever fan, and for me, we'll get to, but I really wanted to, because it's so jazzy, but it's also kind of, it's so like folky, and I think that's what resonates with me, because it makes me feel like the prog, because I love the fantasy vibes that prog gives off, and I feel like Romantic Warrior taps into that, but with its jazz vibe. It's fantasy jazz, and that sounds awesome. It's because it is. It's so good. Romantic Warrior is such a great album. Can listen to it anytime. Like, put it on while working, and your work will be done like 4 times faster, guaranteed. Great album. Song Machine Season 1, Strange Times by Gorillaz. This is their most recent project. I think it's the most recent. I don't think they've come up with anything else. And this one was the most pleasant surprise since when I first discovered... Oh my god, I don't know if I can listen to Smoother Groove right now. I'm going to turn that down a bit. But for me, this was the biggest surprise. This is exactly what I wanted Humans to be. Fucking banger single after banger single. Great use of collaborations. Great, like, concepts surrounding it. Spectacular video production on this, too. Like, this was so good in, like, 2020. This, like, during COVID, to have these come out, like, once a month. It was fantastic. Every song leads and it flows into the next very well. Great beats in the background, which I felt like great hooks that I feel were sorely missed on in Humans. But basically, this is what I wanted to. This is easily like their best project since like post hiatus Gorillaz. Song Machine, easily their best. But yeah, great return to form. The Yes album. So the Yes album of the Yes Trinity. I think this is of the big Yes prog trilogy. I think this is their weakest one. But that's not a knock onto it. You know, Starship Trooper, Yours Is No Disgrace, I See All Good People, still so much good stuff. I just think that there's some valleys in there that I'm not the biggest fan of. But it's like, it's so great. It feels so good to like look back and like look at this in hindsight, look at this retrospective, because it's like, this is a band that has so much potential. And like, I feel like they're starting to tap into it really with this album. I really hope they like make good on that potential. And now we know they do. They do. They make 2 of the best albums ever created. So but we'll get to those. But for now, with the Yes album, I think they laid a solid foundation that they kept up. Bad Motor Finger by Soundgarden. Speaking of that era of rock. Oops, I clicked on one too many. We'll get to Chelsea Wolf. Soundgarden, Bad Motor Finger, rest in peace. Chris Cornell. Love you, bud. Fantastic work on this. Some great heavy metal riffs on here. Still my favorite one. Still my favorite Soundgarden album. Fantastic, I think, all the way through. Great heavy metal vibes. Pain is Beauty by Chelsea Wolf. Like, very gothic pop, gothic folk that, like, carries itself all the way through. Chilling vocals that suck me in, never let me go. Great instrumentals, good catchy, like... It's a lot of just, like, synth folk beats in the background that work, that really work, and really, like, tug at you. And it's like, no. Like, you're here for the long haul. And I'm like, I am. All right. Pain is Beauty. Ha! All right. I had to put on Fallen by Evanescence. So, yeah, you can laugh. You can call Evanescence cringe. You can call whatever. You can call it a product of its time. And, you know, a lot of that is, like, not even untrue. But, like, I can still bop and, like, recite the lyrics to most songs from this album. I think it's easily Evanescence's best work. I think they're very repetitive. They're even a little repetitive on this album. And I think they said everything they needed to say with this first album, but I'm glad they said this album. I'm glad they made this album. It was a big part of my childhood, and I go back and I'm like ready to cringe. I'm ready to be like, oh, this will suck now. But I go back and I listen to some songs and I'm like, nah, I still like it. So yeah, I'm gonna put it on here. I'm gonna put it on this high. Almost out of the fourth quarter. Okay, so we're gonna have a need to have a little bit of conversation about Sewer Slut. I'll be referring to them as June from now on, but they're a very controversial figure in, I think, just the like the internet and music community. I have only discovered them a couple years ago, and to me, I only knew them from Drowning in the Sewer onward. That's all I knew them for the longest time until recently, until really doing research for this. And I mean, the thing is, they are a mentally unstable person. They are doing what they can to get help. I think they said some things like a decade ago that were kind of fucked up. I think that I don't like to hold people against what they did or said when they were a teenager if they've said they've learned, and it kind of sounds like they have. So I'm going to keep just thinking about June as this musician that really, I won't lie, helped me through a lot with their music. Sewer Slut, June was there for me in a lot of the worst times of my life. This music helped me through so much, and I think to deny that is, whether or not it has to do with June, it's a disservice to the music. Separating art from the artist, I think, applies here, personally, and I want to remember them at least for some select albums. That being said, there are some albums on here from June. Schizophrenia Simulation is the first one we will see. I really like this album. I think that songs like Purple Hearts in Your Eyes just convey so much emotion and chaos, and that's what June is emotion and chaos. And I can't, like, it's like beautiful entropy. It's so hard to describe the sort of breakcore that works so well, so masterful, and we're not even at the best parts of it yet. So we'll move on for now, but I wanted to give my little spiel about June, what I think about them. I hope they're doing okay. I know that they've left now. I know that they've, been through a lot, so. From that into the Weezer self-titled album, which is just some wholesome indie rock from the 90s that I think is still just kind of Weezer's best work. It's a lot of fun. I think it's pretty clever. I think it's pretty well written. Great guitar solos. There's not much to complain about the Blue Album. Alright, so this is a little bit cheating. I really enjoyed Aviva. I think it's some great electro pop, great production on pop. We are continuing. Why are you cycling through this so fast? Oh my god. The thing is, I really wanted to put Volume 1 on here, except it was only half an hour long, and I didn't think that could be justified to put on the list. Then Volume 2 came out, and it was also half an hour long, and it really just felt like a continuation of 1. So I'm like, I really want to talk about this album. I really want to put it on this list. I'm just going to put them together so I can talk about more music. But yeah, I think it's some great electro pop, very catchy, great beats, great hooks, easy to sing along to, love to have it in the background. Good stuff. I love Aviva. I love what they do. Anime by Tool, one of the weaker in the weaker half of Tool albums, but it's still on the list. Great hard rock, great songs on here. Stinkfist, Third Eye, fantastic tracks on here. I think this era they hadn't quite figured out exactly what they wanted their sound to be, but it's still a fantastic work. I think a great collection of harsh tracks that really show off what Tool can do at this point in time. But we'll get to the best later. Classics by Ratatat, another breezy listening. No one makes Ratatat sounds like Ratatat. Like, they have their own unique brand, and I love it. I love their... I don't know how they make a guitar sound like that, but it's so ethereal, it's so wonderful. It's like, to me, it's the sound of alt rock of that era, and it's fantastic. Ramble, The Great Discord. I'm surprised no one's heard of this band, especially this album, because it's such good alt metal. I love this album. So heavy, so catchy. The lyrics, the vocalists are great. I think their instrumentals are very underrated. I don't know how they can get this sound out with nobody hearing of them. This is just a fantastic album that I think has gone under the radar so much. It's great. Diamond Eyes by Deftones, my second favorite. Just such an emotionally charged album that carries so much weight to it, and I think it was just channeled so well into the Deftones sound. I'm thoroughly impressed with it. It's great stuff. Lightbulb Sun. All right, the first one from on the list proper for Porcupine Tree. This alongside Stupid Dream are the two main accessible Porcupine Tree albums. The ones that I think more than anything else are alt rock with prog rock, a little tinge of metal, but mostly alt rock and prog rock, and that carries it so hard. It is so easy to get into with this album. There's so many good like singles that you can take out of, which is uncommon for a Porcupine Tree album, I think. That I can't get enough of. I could listen to them any time of the day. Fantastic stuff. Lore by Elder. Catchy, like almost kind of like grimy heavy metal, but in a good way, in a very like beautiful way that just nothing quite sounds like it, but it also sounds like something familiar and something nostalgic. I love Lore. Not a second time. We have another sensor there, sorry. Hold on one sec. Another great ambient album, in theory, sort of taking the inspiration from groups like Dead Can Dance that seem very folky and ambient, ethereal. Like, I love stuff like that. I love like I love things like moody organs. I love things like dark strings. And I think this one captured it so well. Off-World, Cell Dweller, who I think is a little bit underrated. I think people kind of associate Cell Dweller with a lot of just like production and cinematic music, but I think he does that well in a lot of ways, and this is kind of a different take on it. This is a shoegaze album made by Cell Dweller, not terribly long, but still just kind of raw. He has a great voice. He has an unironically amazing voice. Like, not even joking, I love his voice. I think it's fantastic. He has some, like, he really shows off some shoegaze chops. He just kind of decides to make a genre of music and, like, instantly kind of nails it. Like, he really captures a lot of what makes it great. I think the thematic, the overarching theme is like winter, kind of like a cold wasteland sort of thing, and where the vibes you get from that, and it's so relaxing. I love this album. Endless Light by Oh Brother. I discovered this fairly recently, only about a year ago. But it's such like a good, like, it feels like a band in college you knew that took off. You were like, oh, they're going to go big. They're going to get big. And I don't think they did get big, but they at least got more of a budget. They have a production budget, and it really sounds good. They really carried this kind of like heavier indie rock vibe. Here we go. Here's Damnation by Opeth. We talked about it earlier. This is still my favorite Opeth album. What? Blackwater Park. Yeah, I don't really like the screaming vocals, but this really works as a clean vocal Opeth album. And they landed this like pretty early, respectively, in their career. I think it works so well. It works as this mellow progressive rock album with Michael Artfeld still doing fantastic vocal work. I think he sounds amazing as a clean vocalist. I think it's great. Easy to get into, like completely hard to let go from this. It's so hard to like stop listening to this as it goes on. Mezzanine by Massive Attack. I think that this just has some great peaks. A little bit middling, some valleys, but damn, like Angel and Teardrops are so good, man. And I think it does keep up most of that momentum. Such a great, like, 90s, like, in your face. Like I feel like it's so heavy, despite not, like isolated. It's, like, stems and its tracks, like, probably wouldn't be much, but, like, it all feels so heavy when it's all put together. I love it. Devil is Fine. So Zealand Ardor. I love Zealand Ardor as a concept. Kind of this play on the term black metal, the subgenre of metal involving a lot of fast tempo, a lot of just sort of dense instrumentals. It's hard to describe. But play on that by combining that with sort of African American soul music. And I think it works so well in here. I think it works so well. A lot of great instrumentals and production. The vocalist is just going so hard. He's just going so in, and it's so good. It matches the tone of the album great. I love Devil is Fine. Man on the Moon, The End of Day. I really, like, it's hard to describe this album. It's very much not what I'm used to, but I think just, like, the guitar instrumentals, you know, when Rat-a-Tat's featured on there, it's fantastic. Kid Cudi's vocals are so easy to get into, so easy to just kind of chill, vibe to, put on in the background. I can't really complain about this album. I can get through it, like, there's a time I listened to it, like, once a week for a couple months, and it was great. Homogenic by Bjork is still my favorite Bjork album. I think to me, it's just where I feel like Bjork being the most raw. There's a lot of emotion being packed in with all these tracks that just, you know, convince me. Like, she's telling me to like this. Like, I've had people try to get me into Bjork, and I really could only get into Homogenic because this is like Bjork reaching out to me being like, no, you'll like this. There's just so much energy behind it that I love. I can't get tired of. Feather Gun by Richelieu. Fantastic piece. There's, like, I've been convinced over time of the consistency of this album, because I was initially only convinced by certain singles on it, but really the whole thing is so good. Like, fantastic late, like, new prog alt metal that just is carried by so much. It's great. Mariner by Cult of Luna. Another harsh vocalist, but man, like Judy Christmas does so good here. A lot of the albums, just like, if you're in the mood for like raw and harsh metal, fantastic stuff here. Songs to the Deaf, an absolute classic by Queens of the Stone Age. Still probably my favorite there. Just, I think, like, I'm always blown away by the guitars on this thing. Fantastic stuff. Easily kind of like an All Reliable, a fallback on album. Fantastic. La Muerta by Subsignal, kind of they don't do anything too outrageous, I think, with their prog rock vibes, besides being kind of like a prog rock band in the time that they're in. But it does it all so well. It's hard to complain about anything here. I don't think they're bringing too much new to the table, but what they do bring that has been done before is still, like, superb. Shed Blood by Ada Rook. Ada Rook has gone under the radar so fucking much. I love Ada Rook. I think she's fantastic. This is still my favorite album from hers. A perfect lot of chaotic energy, which I think still kind of this less entropic instrumentals behind it. It still feels very calm and sedated compared to their later works. I do like their latest album a lot. Was thinking of putting it on the list, but just didn't make it. But for now, Shed Blood is the old reliable. I can always go back to this and listen to it all the way through. Fantastic piece. Marbles by Marillion, another one that kind of has snuck up on me as time has gone on. Like, I've grown to like this one more and more as time has gone on, because it's just so solid. Every Marbles set, solid prog rock. The Invisible Man is great. Don't Hurt Yourself is still like one of the masterpiece prog rock singles. It's hard to describe a prog rock single, but it's Don't Hurt Yourself is so good. Eyes by Myth and Roid. Everybody knows Myth and Roid as being like kind of the isekai anime soundtrack artists, and yeah, I mean that's where I discovered them, but like they're really good, and this is such a good compilation album of everything that they put out, that they've tossed out to various production companies, and it's worked so well here. I love this album. I love everything on it. You know, like Theater D, LLL, Crazy Scary Holy Fantasy. Like, there's so many good singles on here. It doesn't flow well together. It's a little bit out there. But, man, I vibe to it so hard. I fucks with this album, man. I fucks with Myth and Roid. Lustful Sacrament. So, this is Perturbator's first album after quite a lengthy... Not a lengthy, but... Normally, he was putting out an album every 2 years, and then he took about a 4 or 5 year break. And this was coming off when I was worried about some of my favorite heavier synth and electronic artists putting out an ambient album, a more softer ambient album. Blank Mass put out Inferno, which I really didn't like. Clarence Clarity put out Dead Screen Scrolls, which I didn't really like, but I didn't really mind because he followed it up with something else later. And then Perturbator was coming out with Lustful Sacraments, which really also was another ambient album. But man, this one grew on me. This one still has that Perturbator energy, just a little bit softer, a little bit. And it feels like, it still feels raw. It still feels like it has that dark synth energy beyond it, just in a different sort of tone that I've only gone on to appreciate more over time. I do like this album. Return to Forever. Still, this is not a self-titled album. This is back when it was just a side project from Chick Corea called Return to Forever before spinning off into its own band, and I still think it's one of their best works. I think it still captures that jazz fusion vibe very, very well, and what has convinced me to stick with that portion of his band, or what got me into later works like Romantic Warrior. I was able to get into a lot of stuff like that because of this album showing me that it's such a breezy, easy listen that I can recommend anyone, especially as an intro to jazz fusion. R.I.P. Chick Corea. Fantastic musician. Very talented. Color by Katie Gately. This is such like a chaotic pop album that I recommend someone to try to, like, if they want to leave their comfort zone a little bit. If they're into like the electro pop, into the bubblegum pop, and they want to try something new, try out Katie Gately, because it can be your gateway to a lot of stuff. This is a great album. Gone is Gone, a rock supergroup formed by members of Mastodon, Queens of the Stone Age, and At the Drive-In, and it is as metal as you can expect from that. Fantastic work. Violescent, Starlight, instantly gripping you with this EP. Fantastic work. I love this album. It goes so hard, and it's so much fun to listen to. Images and Words, the debut album from Dream Theater, still has a lot going on with it. This is their most, still relying on prog rock essences before shipping into complete prog metal, and I still feel that flow works. It feels like the beginning of this age of bands like Dream Theater to really take off. They really pioneered this sort of transition from prog rock into prog metal, and it's really visible here. I think this album still holds up. Not my favorite Dream Theater, as we'll see in a bit, but still a fantastic work. I love Images and Words. Hold Your Color by Pendulum. My second favorite Pendulum. Their first full-length album, and I still think it's one of their best. I love good drum and bass, good jungle. When it's done well, to me, it takes my breath away. And I still feel like it was done fairly well here. This is, I think, Pendulum at their most raw, like, kind of dubsteppy. Like, it's hard to say that because it feels too early for that, but it feels like it's the least rocky. It's almost completely synth and electronic, but it really works as a drum and bass album. I think it still holds up. Lots of great tracks on here. Title track, Slam, Tarantula, great stuff. Annabelle's by Gidge. This is the album that I felt I think just does what Compassion does, which was an HM from Forest Swords. I think this one just does it a bit better. Just a little bit better. It carries its weight so much. It flows so well. It's one of the easiest like 70 minutes you'll ever listen to. Every song flows into the next so well. So peaceful, so just like it's like the soundtrack to just you doing like something, I don't know. I've listened to it so much in the background while doing work, and it's so much fun. Sayonara Wild Hearts. Sayonara Wild Hearts really feels like a pop album as a game. Like, they made the pop album first, and they're like, okay, let's make a game for this. Like, but it's a great pop album. It's such great electro pop, even better when enhanced by the game itself. But yeah, I think don't listen to it. There's a version on YouTube, and I'd recommend, like, even though Spotify, you know, or Apple Music cheats their artists, I would recommend doing that over YouTube. But the thing is, it's ordered very awkwardly. I love how this album is ordered in the game, where you play it level to level. And there's a version of that on YouTube, and I'd recommend that over Spotify's version, which is kind of just putting all, like, the vocals at the front and then all the filler in between. And, like, the filler is good, but I think it should be filler. It should... You've already experienced so much, and I think it works so well in the game order. I don't know. But still, it's a fantastic electropop album. Revolver by the Beatles, great stuff, you know, starting off with hits like, you know, Eleanor Rigby, etc. Like, I can't get enough of Revolver. I want to quickly make sure that I am not underselling it. 1 second. We'll get to you, Judgment. But I want to get the overview in here. Yeah, I'm Only Sleeping, Eleanor Rigby, Good Day Sunshine, Tomorrow Never Knows, Yellow Submarine, no. Fantastic Beatles track, one of their best of their middle era, great stuff. Judgment by Anathema, it's the only pre-hiatus album that I put on, the only one not in the new tetralogy that they have. Still kind of have their raw, more harsh rock guitars, still a bit of metal in there, still a bit of a metal tinge. Sorry. But man, when it goes hard and it's nailing those beats, those guitars, those vocals, it's hard to get enough of that. Like One Last Goodbye, the title track, phenomenal guitars. Like, I don't know how they did this. It's great. I think it's got some valleys, it's got some low points, but man, when it's peaking, it's taken off. This is like still one of the most like ambient soundtracks ever. I think it's a phenomenal piece of just raw ambient music where I can put this in the background of anything. This has helped me read, like, this has been the soundtrack to like most manga I've read. Most manga and graphic novels I've read with Ribbon in the background, because it's just such a good ambient thing to just... I mean, it's the game's really about reading books, so I think it kind of makes sense for that. But this is just like an enhancer. Like, its whole job is to enhance whatever you're doing, and I love that. All right, Muse I have mixed feelings on, because there are some fantastic songs that I could single out on like so many albums. You know, Absolution, or Stockholm Syndrome on Absolution, Uprising from the album that Uprising is on. But no album has really been able to consistently keep me all the way through on a Muse album, except Black Holes and Revelations. This one kept me going the whole way through. I felt like it kind of fired on all cylinders all the way through, at least for me. Map of the Problematique, Supermassive Black Hole, Knights of Sidonia. Man, it's so good. This album's really good. See Without Eyes. So, as we'll talk about later, Drink the Sea was one of my favorite albums. It is one of my favorite albums. I love that album. Captures a lot of what makes Glitch Mob great, and I was really excited for their follow-up, Love, Death, and Immortality. Really didn't like it. One of the more disappointing albums I've listened to was Love, Death, and Immortality. And then they brought it back with See It Without Eyes, and it made me fall in love with the band again. I remembered what I loved about it. To me, this was a better transition of a mix of their raw electronic and glitch pop with their the album format of having every other track be with a guest vocalist. I felt like it was a really rocky transition to that from LDI. This felt way more natural. This felt like they weren't compromising any of their style. This felt like they used it as an enhancement to give more of what they wanted to show. And I felt like it worked really well. There's a lot of great just glitch electronic tracks on here, along with some great vocalists. I really love the vocal performance on this one. Great stuff. This was a return to form to me. Visions of Bodies Being Burned. I love Clipping. I love what they're about. I love their style. I love their rap style. I love their production style. It's great, and I love their slasher movie diptych that they've created with Visions of Bodies Being Burned. And prior to that, there is An Addiction to Blood. I think my favorite track is probably Nothing Is Safe by in the first album, but to me this one is more consistent. This one is just a solid trip all the way through. I think it's even better than the first one. Fantastic stuff. Purple by Baroness. A lot of how I feel about Lore by Elder is repeated on here with Baroness. I think they just nail their heavy rock style, their heavy metal style that just keeps you entranced the whole way through if you're into that genre. Doesn't let you go. Consistent. It's very consistent all the way through in terms of the story it wants to tell with its music. And I respect everything it has. I'll have no problem putting on Purple or any. I love their color, their color themes that they go with their albums and their artwork. But for me, Purple is their standout. Ramble Beyond by Basque is one that no one's heard of, but man, it is some good folk rock. It is some good almost folk metal at times, but it's hard to recommend one track, but listen to Ramble Beyond and you'll understand. It's so hard to describe this album, but I love it. Within the Realm of a Dying Sun by Dead Can Dance. I love this album. I think it's a phenomenal ambient album for the time. Very neo-focused, very gothic. Oh, it's so brooding, but in a cool way. I love this album. Kind of ahead of its time too. I'm surprised this hasn't really had much resurgence. Within the Realm of the Dying Sun is just such a masterpiece of being moody, and it's great. Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. So this is also kind of the quintessential 90s rock album. That's there's a reason it's put on so many best of all times list. I think it is a little rocky, and I think you maybe could condense it more. But I mean, for a 2-hour album, it's very solid. It's still way more consistent than I think it has any right to be. I love this one. Lunatic Soul by lead frontman of Riverside, who I am blanking on their name. I am terribly sorry, but I love his solo project in Lunatic Soul. Cool kind of experimental prog rock that really, I think he's able to do a lot that he wouldn't have been able to do on his own by Riverside, and that's impressed me, I think, more than Riverside. Either Fractured or Walking on a Flashlight Beam, I think, are kind of two sides of the same coin. I could see myself putting either one on here, probably not both, just for variety's sake, but I'll put on Fractured here because I think it's such a good example of this experimental, jazzy, alt-rocky, prog-rocky, I want to say mess, but not in a bad way. It's a great amalgam of all these sounds that I can't get enough of. In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Not my favorite King Crimson, second favorite. We are jumping ahead there, Woven Hand. I get you're eager. But this, I am constantly astounded that this album came out in 1969. How the fuck did they make this album in 1969? How did they make Epitaph, 21st Century Schizoid Man, How? It sounds so ahead of its time. So, I mean, I know it's like the first. I know that's the whole shtick, is that it was the first. But like, God, it sounds so ahead of its time. It's so much fun to listen to. It's such a great, especially being a fan of this genre and hearing so much of what came after it. It's so fun to see the roots, and it still holds up. It still holds up as a fantastic prog rock experience. I love this. I love this album still. I think it holds up great. Mosaic by Woven Hand. You know, I'm not. It's very like biblical and almost gospely, which is like the messaging isn't really for me. But man, does it nail neo folk? I have yet to find. This is my favorite like neo folk album, and it's just like it's so weird. It's like Bob Dylan on acid. I love it. It's like folk that has, I don't know. It's like a modern day Ren Fair. It's really hard to describe. I love Mosaic by Woven Hand. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, so I'm a Hiroyuki Sawano nut. I know his music can kind of be over the top and cinematic sometimes, but man, I love it to death. And I think '01 is a great collection of it. I think it's a great collection of a lot of his best pieces, a lot of underground pieces. I think it's just, it captures you. It's, you know, compelling for a reason. It's used in a lot of these epic animes for a reason. I love it. Rhea by Oathbreaker, quintessential black metal. Fantastic black metal album to listen to when you're angry and you want to scream. I've done this to relax. I've listened to Rhea many times to relax by screaming along with it. It is fantastic and metal as hell. 000 by Uplift Spice, probably my favorite J-rock band that nobody talks about. Super catchy, super enjoyable, super fun to strum along to. Like, I love really every track on this. It's so consistent. I'm surprised more people haven't heard of this, but, you know, lots of great stuff on it. Definitely give a listen if you haven't too. Catchy J-rock, phenomenal. I was initially very down on Think Peace by Clarence Clarity, the second effort by Clarence Clarity, because it really felt like after No Now, he was kind of done. Like, he had said everything he wanted to say, and he kind of knew that. He was like, I put everything I had into that album. What else is there? And I was worried that Think Peace was going to feel a little bit forced as a result. And I think it might have at first, but I'm listening to it more and more, and I'm like, man, like, everything here is still very solid, and it's still a lot of what makes Clarence Clarity so special. It's definitely in a lighter package. I don't think it peaks as high as in No Now, but what's here is still fantastic, and I can still, and I think based on its length and its vibe, sometimes I'd rather listen to Think Peace than No Now. Not terribly often, but sure. And I think even, you know, Clarence knows that. Clarence has always said, like, you know, I think No Now is my best work. But, you know, there's still a lot to love in Think Peace, I think. Peace. Alright, so this, like, come on. Mick Gordon is just a mastercraft of industrial metal, and I really want to see if he ever puts out, like, an actual just studio album, as opposed to just composing work. But for now, I will gladly take the Doom OST as that example, because I think it's just so raw, so, like, it's hard not to get amped up. It's such a perfect soundtrack for the game it's in. It's such a perfect soundtrack to let us listen to on its own. I love it. The Circle by Heritoire. Heritoire had not impressed me with kind of just another screaming vocal band, screaming metal band, until this album, where there was a lot of, like, ethereal soundscapes going on with it. It wasn't just screaming. It wasn't just, you know, raw metal. There was a lot going on here that felt tasteful, that felt more engaging than what they had done previously. So I really enjoyed this album. Insurgentes by Steven Wilson. For a long time, I would have said Insurgentes was my favorite Steven Wilson album, his favorite solo album. That has fallen out of favor for a few reasons. One, because I don't think it is true. I think my tastes have grown different. And two, I just don't think it's a great example of his work. I think it's a phenomenal piece, but Steven Wilson wanted to make a shoegaze album. He has a great respect for the genre, and he was like, I want to do this. And it wasn't, at the time, this was right when the incident came out, so Porcupine Tree was still a thing. So I don't think people minded that he was experimenting with his solo work, because PT was still there. And I think Insurgente's worked. I think if you put this out now, it would be not received bad, but received, I think, worse than in 2009. But that being, all backstory aside, I think it's a great-ass shoegaze record. I think if you're in the mood for some fine shoegaze, some fine, like, droning ambient with that tinge of prog in the background, Insurgente's delivers, like, every time. And even still, like, Harmony Korine is, like, a crowd favorite. I love, like, Significant Other. The title track is a phenomenal ambient closer. It's great. Flow State. So, like, Tash Sultana is just, like, needs no introduction. A fantastic, talented multi-instrumentalist. And I think she really brought out everything she had with Flow State. It's so entrancing and mesmerizing just what she's able to do, or what they are able to do, rather, with just all the instruments at their disposal. And it's on full display here. You can get the full enjoyment out of it. I love it. Since I Left You. The Avalanches, and specifically this album, didn't grow on me at first. And I think that's just because the title track really didn't work for me. And it still doesn't really work for me. The title track and first track wasn't great for me. And then I listened to, like, everything else. And I finally gave the whole album a shot, and it gripped me so hard. It's so good. Like a masterpiece of Plunderphonics. Frontier Psychiatrist is still a banger. Ito is a banger. Oh, God. There's just so many good tracks on this. I'm going to take a stretch break at 100. And get some water. Escape of the Phoenix. Oh, Evergrey. I don't know, everything about Evergrey sounds so standard. Everything about, like, their album artwork is like, oh, you know exactly what they're getting into. But, like, especially with their most recent album, and they figured out what they are, and they figured out what they're capable of, they're just kind of, they've pushed their symphonic metal to the best it can be, and it's really good. I love Escape of the Phoenix. This album rules. It's just them. They know what they're about. They know what they can do well, and they do that. And it's great. It's some great symphonic heavy metal. I love it. Year of the Snitch, the most recent Death Grips outing. A lot of people have described it as their most accessible work, and I think, you know, maybe that's true, but it's like, you know, that's in comparison to the rest of Death Grips. Like, it's nothing, you know, it's still gonna be harsh listen. It's still, you gotta know what you're getting into. But I think they still do it well. They're still able to put out great music. They're still able to put out this industrial hip-hop that just goes so hard. I, like, love listening to. It's such a perfect blend. For me, I really prefer, like, industrial style hip-hop where it's like the production is on par with the vocals. Like, it's not just the vocals that carry it. And it's still, like, on point with here. I have really no complaints with Year of the Snitch. It was great. As Bread as a Thousand Suns is probably my favorite, like, neo-folk ambient gothic album that I think, you know, Dead Can Dance was using back then, but I think as Arcana has kind of perfected more. This album is such a good breeze. I think this is kind of a one of a kind album. I don't think they're all like this, but this album nailed it. I love this album. I can get through it so much, so often, just put in the background and just be, like, instantly, like, transported to some, like, fantasy, like, wilderness. It's great. Run the Jewels 1, my favorite Run the Jewels album. Still my favorite. I still prefer 1. I feel like I'm so alone on that. I feel like I'm the only one I know who's like, you still prefer 1? And I'm like, yeah, I still prefer 1. I just think its industrial production is still the best on this. I love the vocal structure of this. I love how it flows. I love the format of it. To me, it's one of the best industrial hip-hop albums. I love Run the Jewels 1. The Optimist, the most recent and probably last Anathema release, the end of their new prog tetralogy. To me, I always like to say, for me, Anathema releases, they come out exactly when they need to. The Optimist was the album I needed at the right time in, like, 2017, when I wanted them to do this. It's like, I need this certain new prog aesthetic, this progressive pop vibe, this art rock vibe, and they delivered in spades. This is such a great album from beginning to end. consistent instrumentals. Not afraid to just like be catchy, and I think that works in their favor. Phenomenal album. After Hours by The Weeknd, another kind of phenomenal album that hit me when it needed to. Mid 2020, you know, COVID hit, and I was just stuck I was working from home, and I listened to After Hours a ton. I like The Weeknd. I love his sort of ambient mellow vibe with catchy synth production in the background, catchy like house production in the background, alongside very moody, very like easy to listen to vocals. He has such a great voice for this sort of thing, and I think After Hours carried that like raw emotion. It sounds a bit angry at times, and I like that. It sounds a bit aggressive at times, and I like that. It's great. I love this album. One of the peak ambient albums I've ever heard. Rain Temple is just such a masterpiece of... What are we doing? I held my hand over the arrow. Rain Temple satisfies like such a good ambient synth itch at all times. Put it on and like it uses like 10 different keyboards so well at so many different moments. It's great. My favorite Beatles release, the longest one, the double album, the White Album, the self-titled album, The Beatles, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Octopus Garden, Revolution, and all that shit. I love this album. I really do. We're going to not continue on a Mastodon disc yet because I wanted to pull up the Beatles song list because I'm never quite sure. I just want to be sure I never miss... Back in the USSR is on here. Even like Bungalow Bill I like. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is my favorite track. My favorite Beatles track, period. Helter Skelter's on here. Crybaby Cry's on here. Me and My Monkey is still fucking good. There's so many fun tracks. Like, there's a good mix of just fun tracks and tracks that go hard. I love it. It's my favorite Beatles album. Emperor of Sand, everyone kind of slept on this, I think. This is probably my second favorite Mastodon, and for good reason. I think it kind of maintains a good, like, single structure all throughout. Every song is mainly just, like, 5 minutes long, but they go so hard, they're so raw, it's such good progressive metal, they're such quintessential prog metal, especially for, like, the mid-aughts and 2010s. It's so good. Hollow Knight, a emotional, like, tour de force. Great use of just, like, piano and orchestral pieces. Fantastic stuff. Destroy by Agent Fresco is kind of this alt-rock underground hit that I think a lot of people slept on when it came out, and I think it carries super well. I think every track elevates the one before it. I think it has great flow. I think it does exactly what it sets out to do very nicely, and it was there for me in college. I loved it. Oh, the last one from Circles was also kind of just the consistent what you see is what you get. But it does it so well. It's such, like, vocals are great, guitars are great. There's really not much more to say beyond that. It's just such a satisfying prog metal album. I love it. Alright, I need a break. But we'll be back for the top 100 in a sec. I got myself some water. Now, I think I'm quoting some meme here or something, but it's like the bit where it's like, if you're not a fan of peak, if you're not a fan of musical brilliance, sonic euphoria, you can get out, because that's what this next 100 are. Pure bliss. Good shit. I want to get my ranking. I want to get the list up so I know when the actual, like, really good stuff will take off. But you know what I mean. We're starting off with New Levels, New Devils, and a lot of people hate this album because it represented a lighter direction that Polyphia was going. And I would hate that if it wasn't so fucking catchy. New Levels, New Devils slaps. Like, every song goes so hard. It's the new Rat-a-tat. New Polyphia is the new Rat-a-tat, and it's great. I love this album. It is so catchy. It's so much fun to listen to. It's so good. Oh, and here we have Aphelion, the most recent record by Leprous. I was so hesitant to put this on because of, like, recency bias. I wasn't sure if they differentiated enough from Pitfalls, but man, yes they did. It's a lot more, a little bit back to prog metal, I think, from their old album, from their old pre-Pitfalls, but still combining a lot of the prog rock, art rock, more vocalist, like songs written by the vocalist style that Pitfalls had, and I think it works wonderfully. This album is phenomenal for when it was made, what they were trying to do, and you know what they wanted to do. I think they accomplished everything they set out to with this album, and I think that alone is impressive. I love Aphelion. Probably my third favorite Leprous album. I'm surprised I had not heard of Fleshfield or this album beyond just like running into it on Spotify, but it's so good. It's so hard industrial rock that just like it's a good angry listen. It's a good harsh when you just want something like raw, aggressive, and it's like it's industrial rock, not like screaming vocals, but harsh vocals that really just like get you in the mood. The second June album, Sewer Slut, Draining Love Story, a much more consistent album, I find. A lot more of just a good collection of isolated singles that work really well. Things like Mr. Kill Myself, Sacrifice. I think Slow Death is on there. Great stuff. I think it's just a solid, more solid breakcore album, just with a collection of fantastic singles that work really well as a collection. Animals by Pink Floyd, wonderful prog rock endeavor. Great, just kind of easy listening to, especially now. I think Animals still holds up fairly well. Very kind of quaint, I think. Ooh, what are we doing there? Quaint listening. A lot of people like it, think it's a pure Pink Floyd. Just shy of mine, but I love a lot of what it brings to the table. The Sky Moves Sideways by Porcupine Tree. Easily their best psychedelic rock album. One of my favorite psychedelic rock albums, period. That title track goes so hard. It fucking transports you. Dislocated Day is so good. I love this album. I think it does exactly what it wants to do. It's space rock bliss at like a time when like you'd think everything regarding that would have been done, but nah, we still got some tricks, bro. Posthumous Survival Horror, a fucking phenomenal return to form by Bring Me the Horizon. This album goes hard as hell, mixed by Mick Gordon, going back to their metalcore roots. It's not that long, but like every track is just banger after banger, and they go so hard. Oh, I love this album, man. I was listening to this like nonstop. It was so good. Hold on. We gotta answer some texts. What are we on to next? Resin by Love. Okay, so they've described themselves as like this mixture of like industrial metal meets like psychedelic, and I call them sludge gaze. A mixture of like sludge metal and shoegaze. And I mean that in a great way because I think it's the best of both worlds. The idea of just this, it's almost black gazy. It's almost like black gaze, but not quite. I think it is a little bit more like sludge and stoner metal, but it still does a great job of just creating these soundscapes that envelop you. Like they drag you into their world. They drag you into their guitars, their riffs, their vocals are very haunting. Fantastic stuff. And this is probably my favorite album of them. It's their first. I think it's what the best they've accomplished so far. But it's a fantastic effort, I think. Let It Burn. White Pony, my favorite Deftones album. That's not a very uncontroversial opinion. I just think it's the most consistent. I think every track flows into the next very well. I think it's a great It works well thematically. I think it's the vocalist at their peak. I think it's the instrumentalists at their peak. I really got nothing to complain about White Pony. A lot of people have heard it. Fantastic stuff. Handmade Cities by Pliny. I think a lot of people know this because I think it was Ariana Grande. It was either Ariana Grande or Doja Cat who like stole some riffs from this album. But I knew it because I liked Pliny. I knew about it because I love Pliny. Pliny is such a great guitarist. He's like this prog rock Jimi Hendrix. He can do fucking anything with a guitar. And I think that's on display here with his first full-length album in Handmade Cities, where he just has so many good like riffs, so many good rhythms and harmonies and beats that just are collected into like such a wild ride that works really, really well. It's such a great, like, I'm so glad like his first full studio album turned out this well. 3 by Moderat. Oh, let's you just like this Moderat album because it's actually an electropop album. And I'm like, yeah, it is an electropop album, and I think that works really well. I like their ambient stuff really well, but this feels more like it's saying more. This feels like it's doing more. And I respect that, I think. I respect Moderat 3 for just being unabashed what they want. And I think it's them at their full potential, in all honesty. I really love this album as a result. Like, the Fool, Reminder, goes so hard. Backwash. We stand a queen. I love Backwash. I think she's great. I love, like, it's so many things. It's like, it's industrial, it's hip-hop, it's metal, it's angry, it's passionate. I love this album. I like Here Buried With My Rings and Dresses. It makes you just want to, like, go out and just, like, fucking, like, you know, it makes you want to just go out and, like, punch some asshole because they're an asshole, you know? Maybe that's just me. But it makes me want to give Backwash a hug because I think she's great. And she goes really hard in this album. Features Ada Rook, who I mentioned earlier, who's great. I'm trying to think of things to say, but you should listen to this album. One of the best industrial hip-hop albums I've ever heard. That bleeds into like industrial metal and works really well. Tycho by Danger, the first full-length album by Danger. You know, that guy who titles all his music by the time when it was completed. One of the best, electronic albums I've listened to. One of the best club beats albums I've listened to. I think every song works really well. Every song has grown on me. I can enjoy every track on here at this point. I love it. I think anyone can get something out of this. Anyone's going to enjoy at least one song off of Tycho. Flamboyant by Dorian Electra. Phenomenal bubblegum electro pop album. I love this album. Fantastic thematics. Oh no, Lex likes an album that like satirizes gender and pokes fun at it and, you know, presents it in a new way. I love it. I love it so much. I love the messages beyond it. It's also catchy. The production's incredible. I think Dorian's in peak form here. Love My Agenda too, but I think Flamboyant is just really captures the vibe a little bit more. It's more consolidated, more consistent. Love Flamboyant. Fantastic effort. End of an Empire is probably my favorite Soul Dweller. I had this on loop for so fucking long when it came out. Like, I know it's a little bit of, like, you know, cinematic, you know, schlock every now and then. But for me, it's like Soul Dweller, again, I think he has a fantastic voice. Unironically. I think he just is a great singer. And I think he has some great electronic chops. I think it worked really well. And I can find something to enjoy in every track on here. Yeah, it's a little bit much. It's a little bit on the nose, a little bit schlocky, and a little bit, you know, what you see is what you get. But if you just kind of go with the flow and accept it for what it is, it's a lot of fucking fun. Bronze by Crippled Black Phoenix. A lot of bangers on here. A lot of what makes Crippled Black Phoenix so great is present on this record. A lot of investing and rapturing rock ballads are on here. That's the sort of thing that I dig most out of it. It's quite great. Their Bear album as opposed to their Wolf album, spoilers, which we'll get to later. And here we are. I teased in the HMs there was going to be one Supergiant game to make the cut. And it was Transistor. This one is such a cohesive one. The vocal tracks flow right. The vocal tracks are all my favorite, along with, you know, the more electronic mixed with Darren Korb's kind of just like it's hard to describe Darren Korb's style, but you know to see it. But this is kind of like more of an electronic tinge on top of it, and I think works so well. He did it so well. It flows. It's such good connective tissue with all the vocal tracks. Works so well in game. It's still probably my favorite Supergiant OST, and that's why it is on the list proper and so high up. Blackfield 2, we talked about Blackfield 1 earlier, and it's a lot of what I said, why I like that in terms of its art rock nature, but with that tinge, I think there is some, bringing in a little bit more progress, a little bit more heavy shit bleeding over from Porcupine Tree that I think only enhanced it. I don't think it diluted a lot of what made the art rock single nature work. I think it enhanced it. I think it made it even better. And unfortunately, I think this is out of, I think it's only 5, but there might be more albums. 1 and 2 are really the only, really one of the only 2 worth listening to. And that sounds kind of harsh, but in terms of as a complete album, yeah, it's really just 1 and 2 you can listen to. Night is the New Day is Catatonia at their prog metal peak. Fantastic vocals. The riffs are become so iconic to me. Just a good, consistent mesh of what makes Catatonia work. It feels like their magnum opus in this genre. And I love it. I love what they've been able to pull off here with prog rock. So catchy, so engrossing and enrapturing. Love it. Haha, Proto Men, Act 2, The Father of Death. A fantastic rock opera. I don't care if it's based off a 1980s video game. This is a fantastic rock opera. So engaging, so easy to sing along to. The vocalists have put in their work, and they've just made such a cohesive, fantastic... I want to say it's even got some, prog into it that have let me enjoy it. Made me enjoy it even more. But as we saw next, Blank Mass, Animated Violence Model. Just his synth breakcore gets me so amped up and gets me so going. This is, I think, a little more aggressive than I think World Eater was, which was a little bit more ambient and droney. But this one still gets me going. This one is such a great ride from beginning to end in terms of ambient, synth. Literally even drum and bassy at sometimes too. It's great. Plastic Beach by Gorilla is probably my favorite for a while there, but not quite anymore. But still, just a lot. This has just so much to enjoy. It's so funky, so enjoyable. I can just stick it on while walking, and I'm while taking a walk, and I find myself grooving to every single on here. Love it. Love Stylo on Melancholy Hill, Rhinestone Eyes, Super Fast Jellyfish, the Plastic Beach title track. Man, it's just got so many bops. It's hard to complain. Sonder by Tesseract, a fantastic, consistent prog metal album that just knows exactly what it is. It's kind of an early effort from them, but it seems so consistent. I love this artwork too of the solar system. It's so cool. But it's just so consistent. It's such an enjoyable record that I think a lot of the genres that it contains I've talked about prior, but it nails everything so well. Similar with Ghostmile, actually. I think it nails a lot of... I think it's just barely a bit better, more consistent, maybe a bit more experienced than Sonder. But a lot of that same vibe, a lot of mastering the most alt-rocky prog metal can get. And that's a weird way to put it, but I think you'll know it if you listen to it. Yeah, Guilty Gear Strive is this far up because it's just a phenomenal... It feels like an album, and B, it's just a phenomenal consistency of vocal track. Banger after banger after banger after banger of just great vocal tracks that all relate to a character, are all phenomenal, and we'll see another instance of that in a bit. But I think it's just done superbly here by Ishiwatari and his team. Every song works for me. I love every song on here. It's great. Quadrophenia by The Who, sort of this rock opera ballad from The Who. Obviously, they need no introduction. But to me, this is the one that I can get the most into with this overarching theme. Even some leitmotifs we see present with things like The Love Rain or Me, which is still one of my favorite songs. But I love what this album does. I love what this album tried to do at the time, and I feel like it's ambitious that mostly realized its potential. Blood by OSI, a very consistent and enjoyable 2000s rock record that has stuck with me for a while. I love this one, and it's very easy to just decide to put on. Metal Resistance by Baby Metal is still... I will defend this album to the death. I will defend this band to the death. I think they are very... I think their first album, their self-titled album, was a bit gimmicky. I think it was a bit... you know, it had sort of this meme to it where it's like, oh, idol metal isn't really a thing yet, so it's cute, like, cute girls singing to, like, harsh metal in the background, and that's kind of a bit. And I think they knew that it was a bit. Not in the sense that they were gonna... They didn't mean it, but in the sense that they needed to push themselves more. There are some good singles on that self-titled, but on its own, it's really only great because of a gimmick, because it really was doing nothing else. We really need to not just embrace this genre, but create something really great in it. And then Metal Resistance came out, and they did that. That's the thing, is they did it. They actually made, like, this great metal album that just happened to add idols singing in it. And it's great. It's a fantastic, like, the genre of idol metal or kawaii metal, Lamau, has started because of mainly baby metal, but this is just genuinely great idol metal. This isn't just a gimmick because it's idol metal. This is just this is to me the pinnacle of the genre. I love Metal Resistance. I think it has so many tracks that I can single out as great ones, as just amazing metal tracks. I love this album from beginning to finish. As like someone who's already a fan of baby metal just with their self-titled, and for them to put out this right after, phenomenal. Scandroid self-titled. So the thing is, it's like their Cell Dweller works. It's very on the nose, very what you see is what you get, very, you know, I don't like using the word cringy, but I could see someone thinking that about it. But to me, it's like, it's so catchy. It's such an earworm. Cell Dweller is like an earworm farmer. He is able to create earworms instantly, and and I think Scandroid is the best example of it. I've only listened to this album maybe like 20 times, and I can already recite like every lyric from it. I could still like remember every lyric from every song. It's such a great for like a car ride. It's so great while working. It's so great like whenever. You could put this album on anywhere and it would slap. The production is banging. The vocals are are still banging somehow. I don't know how he does it. It feels so mass-produced, and yet it's so catchy, and and it's hard to put it up higher because of that, because it still kind of feels mass-produced, but like, I can't help that it slaps. I can't help that I'm digging the fuck out of it, man. All right. Bottomless Pit by Death Grips. This is their most... They try to embrace a little bit of a side of metal to their industrial hip-hop. I'm glad they did it once, and I'm glad they did it here. I don't think they want to do it again, and it's probably for the best. But here, when they actually wanted to do everything they could with the genre, I felt like it worked really well. This really melded their industrial hip-hop style with a bit of a hard rock metal tinge to the background that worked amazing. I think that they were able to pull it off this once super, super well. All right. That's the Spirit by Bring Me the Horizon. My favorite record of theirs, I think it's just, I like it a little bit more than Sempiternal. I think it's just a phenomenal piece where it's just banger after banger. I don't think there's a ton of cohesion, but there's still consistency to me, where I think I like each track equally. I love, there's so many bangers on here, I could sing along to any of them. It's maybe more accessible than Sempiternal, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just, it captures Bring Me the Horizon spirit while being a little bit more alt-rocky and appealing. And not appealing, but accessible. And that's worked really well for me. Alright, 69 Onward. Nice. I want to be real with y'all. This is high 9s or higher. You're either better than a 9.5 out of 10. Better 9.8 at least. 9.7, 9.8 at least onto a 10. Onward. That's what we're dealing with here, okay? I'm not shirking my duty. Alright? These are jams only. Bangers only. Masterpieces only. The big boys. Number 69, Demon Days by Gorillaz. Still, I think, their best work. Fantastic collabs all the way to iconic songs that have just been relevant for years, decades at this point. Feel Good Inc., El Mañana, November Has Come, Dirty Harry, Kids with Guns. Like, if you like Dare, too. I don't really like Dare, but, you know, that's kind of the one low point on the album. But if you like it, hey, that's even more. I think it's just phenomenal. Brings the Damon Albarn production and vocals along with the riot, along with fantastic collaborations. It's great stuff. It's all I could ask for from Gorillaz. It's so good. OK Computer by Radiohead. That their alt-rock peak. This is Radiohead's alt-rock peak. Paranoid Android. Fantastic works alongside many more that just keep me coming back. I love OK Computer. I think it's a fantastic alt-rock effort from the 90s. One of the best they've ever done. One of. From Voodoo to Zen. No one knows this album, and it's really just like, it's all instrumentals, but it's the most engrossing and rapturing, like, electronic rock instrumentals I'll ever hear. It's so good. I don't know how no one's heard of it. But yeah, I really can't complain with from Voodoo to Zen. Fantastic work all the way through. Love them. This is my favorite work from them. A fantastic electronic rock instrumental mix. The Fall of Hearts. I said Night of the New Day is Catatonia's best prog metal outing. This is their best outing to me. I love their transition into more of a lighter prog rock style. All, like, lighter fare, but still so beautiful, so enrapturing, so engaging. I love this album to death. It's so consistent, it's so enjoyable, it's such a masterpiece of what Catatonia is able to do, and it's like, they kind of nailed it. They kind of knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they fucking killed it. Volume 4, Slaves of Fear. Yes, all the lyrics are very on the nose. They're very edgy. It gets a bad rap because of that, and I think that's kind of fair. However, every track slaps so fucking hard. The production on this thing is so good. The instrumentals on this thing is so good. It's my favorite Health album, and it shouldn't be, but it is because I can't get enough of those instrumentals. And even, like, the lyrics, I know it's on the nose, I know it's edgy, and I know it's, like, not saying anything revolutionary, but it's like, God, it just matches, like, they know what they're about, and I love that about them. Alright. Now we're getting into some big boys. Big boy shit. Some masterpiece shit with Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise by the Deer Hunter, number 64. This is them at their best. This is them at their rock ballad best. This is them at their prog rock best. This is them at their indie folk best. Everything that the Deer Hunter can do, they do well here. And I can't get enough of what they have going on here. Like, I never want this album to end. It's so consistently enjoyable. Fantastic work. Deer Hunter's best work, Deer Hunter's most phenomenal work from beginning to end. Can't get enough. Now, Uncanny Valley, my favorite Perturbator album. I feel like it's just them at their dark synth best, them at their consistent catchy best, them at their aggressive entropy, chaotic best. That still, you know, nails everything that I like about what he's able to do as a DJ. Fantastically consistent, fantastically enjoyable all the way through. Uncompromising. And I think that matters a lot when it comes to his genre. Yep, alright, so we have the Undertale soundtrack, which, you know, yeah, I think anyone can agree. You know, whether your thoughts on Undertale is, that soundtrack is a bop. A masterful use of leitmotifs, a masterful use of synths. as well as utilizing your presentation to the maximum. I mean, I like Undertale as much as the next guy, but I love the soundtrack. I think it's just a wonderful experience. Worth listening even if you aren't going to play the game. I think Toby Fox did a masterful job with it. I never looked at the... Alright, the full title of this song is Good Apollo and Burning Star 4 Volume 1 from Fear Through the Eyes of Madness. And go back, no, we're gonna repeat it again now. Good Apollo and Burning Star 4 Volume 1 from Fear Through the Eyes of Madness. Good Apollo and Burning Star 4 Volume 1 from Fear Through the Eyes of Madness by Coheed and Cambria. I am not... I think that they're very big with the hard prog hard rock, prog metal scene. I'm not that invested with Coheed and Cambria. I think a lot of their music's too samey. I think they kind of repeat the same bits a little bit over and over. I like their concept and theory of the graphic novel tie-in, but, you know, it's okay. Except this album. This album is the exception. This album goes hard, at step 1 through step 100, wherever it ends. Fantastic album that just keeps the pace the entire way through. I get what they're going for all the way through. Fantastic sounding, consistent, comprehensive. Love it. It feels like a prog metal epic on its own, with or without the graphic novel, and I love that. Katana Zero by Thijs Ludwig and Bill Kiley. Alright. In another realm, 3 years ago, number 60 would have been Hotline Miami, and then I played Katana Zero, and it blew me out of the water, and that soundtrack, I'm sorry, but it's composed by one artist, and I think it's Hotline Miami could have made the list, but it's a compilation. It's a compilation of various different artists, and that's fine. But Katana Zero, 2 guys made this, and it's like 2 hours long, and every track goes so hard. It's such good synth. It's such good electronic synth that works so well in this cyberpunk world. Oh, it's so fucking good. I love it. Immersion by Pendulum, my favorite Pendulum album. I felt like In Silico didn't do too much to me after Hold Your Color, but Immersion brought it right back, mixing their drum and bass style along with electronic rock. And there's so many bangers. It's so consistent. That's what makes this so great. It's like, if there was just like a couple club hits, that'd be one thing. But the thing is, no, there's like, you know, Under the Waves, Watercolor, The Fountain, The Island, Crush, Encoder, Self versus Self. Fuck, man, it's so good. Genesis, it's so good. I can name a whole track list just because it's so good. I love every track on here. It feels so consistent. It feels so enjoyable. It's such a good listen no matter what mood you're in. I think it's just the best we're going to see from Pendulum, even if they do like release more music. I don't think we're ever going to quite reach immersion levels again. For this, we fought the Battle of Ages by Subrosia. Moody, kind of heavy sludge metal that works really well with the vibe that they go with. The gothic style with their vocals, it feels so just brooding, but like vibey at the same time. Like kind of almost like stonery, but like, at least to me, and I love it. I love the emotion that they pack into this vibe. Works so well. World Eater, slightly better, I think, than Animated Violence Mild. World Eater, I think, is a great combination of their intense breakcore along with their droning ambient that Blank Mass is able to do. Fantastic mix all the way through. Every song, I think, can be singled out and listened to on their own for a different occasion, along with just consistently listening to the album all the way through if you want it. Great stuff. East 1 and 2. I am putting an East album on here because I think that this one actually flows well as an album. A, it does flow well as an album. And B, it's super iconic. I am not done talking about Nihon Falcon. Thank you very much. But every song to me here is so iconic, works really well as an album, flows so well from one to the next. Very well presentation-wise. A great, like, accomplishment for the time as well. Like, soundtracks didn't sound like this. Even, I know this is the remastered version, but this was like, even on the CD, like the PC CD, like, no, like the PC Engine, I believe, like the TurboGrafx CD, this was still like, the quality was still stupid good. Alright? So to me, it's so iconic, so important and influential, and it still holds up as an album. I gotta put East 1 and 2 on here. Massive Addictive. So Amaranth was my symphonic metal guilty pleasure kind of for like a lot of 2020, 2019. And a lot of that has to do with Massive Addictive. This is my favorite album of theirs. I think it's just so solid, so entertaining the whole way through. It's just kind of I don't want to say turn your brain off because that makes them like, I feel like that's ruder to them, but it's like if you just want to vibe to some catchy, good, enjoyable symphonic metal that's well produced, yeah, this is about as good as you can get, and it's really good, so go for it. Eat the Elephant by a Perfect Circle. I would have probably put this higher before, but I've kind of leaned my opinion on this. It's still very, very good. I mean, it made it all the way up to 54. I think it's still one of the best albums I've heard. I think I prefer Perfect Circle's older work a bit better, though. I think this one feels a little bit thematically cohesive, but musically not so. I feel like it doesn't flow too well. But I think everything on their own as a single works really well. And once you're into it, you're in. Like, this can grip you. And it's worth multiple listens because of that. But overall, I think it's a little weaker than the rest of the Perfect Circle's catalog, but that just shows how much I love this sort of, like, pseudo-alt-rock. I don't know, it's like alt-heavy rock. It's weird to talk about a Perfect Circle. Affinity by Hacken, easily my favorite Hacken album, and it carries itself so hard. I love this album. Such great prog metal, like, great soundscapes all the way through. Know what they're about. They know how to land a good instrumental section. They know how to make their songs long and enjoyable, and it works really well. The Chrono Trigger soundtrack, still phenomenal. I think it still works as a solid album on its own as an OSV. Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu are two of my favorite composers in the video game medium. I think the soundtrack just nails everything it's supposed to, and it sounds beautiful, and it uses the 16-bit SNES sound chip to absolute perfection. Fantastic. Magnolia by the Pineapple Thief. I am, not afraid to be critical of the Pineapple Thief. I think they're so samey. I think they're very, they don't innovate at all. I don't think that there's too much different about their albums. It's hard for me to get involved and invest into a new one. Except Magnolia. This one gets me every time. This one, I think, is just such a consistent work of art. This one, I think, has so many solid singles. I think they're using the instruments that they have to the best of their ability. And I think they nail it. This is the best thing that we're going to get out of Pineapple Thief. Easy is Magnolia. Unless they do something crazy with Gavin or some shit. But this is Pineapple Thief's peak. Black Box by Major Parkinson. So this is just such an emotional roller coaster of just... I like Major Parkinson, but to me, until Black Box, it felt too little musical theatery, too sort of this weird gimmicky of it's a harsh vocalist with this sort of happy-go-lucky light sounding. But they leaned into it here. It's very brooding. It's very dark and mysterious, very kind of great electronic production. Brilliant instrumentals, brilliant guest stars on here. I think this is just really works well for Major Parkinson. I don't know if we'll ever get another album from them, but I'd really love to see more of this. This is easily my favorite album of theirs. I think it just works so well with their style of this broody electronic, not even really industrial rock, but sort of pseudo-prog. Cruel Melody by Blacklight Birds. Alright, Blacklight Birds, as we all know, a band started by the only salvageable part of Limp Bizkit. You mean, and I don't mean Fred Durst. Oh, you mean Wes Borland then? I'm like, yes, I mean Wes Borland. The best part of Limp Bizkit, Wes Borland made his own band Blacklight Burns in the mid-aughts. And under that original band setup where he brought in a lot of his friends, a lot of people you can trust, this was really the only album of that lineup. And it's a shame because it's so good. It's so good. It's such it knows what it's about. This is not new metal. This is very much alt rock, alt metal, moody, tasteful too. It's very to me it's most tasteful because the last three songs are softer. They're more solemn, but there's still a lot of heavier, more in your face stuff that goes really well. Wes's singing is great. The instrumentals are phenomenal. I can't find much to complain about it. I'm surprised I don't hear many people talking about Cruel Melody. It's such a great album. All right. Remember when I said Guilty Gear Strive, you get another album that's just a video game album comprised of a compilation of fantastic vocal tracks. That's this. It's phenomenal and it's meme to death, but yeah, it's meme to death for a reason because they all slap. Every vocal track on here is so good that I'm not gonna need to justify that. Fuck it. We don't need to justify that. It's so good. All right. But into Montero. Into Montero by Lil Nas X, where I think Montero is so like he's such a great vocalist. The production on this is so good. The beats on this from Day Trip is so good. I mean, obviously, like I can't directly relate to being, a gay person of color, but I can. But the ideas, the themes of like wanting self acceptance, demanding acceptance from others without compromise is something like I can relate to. The idea of like wanting to be who you are and like not being afraid of that is something that I think like myself and a lot of people can relate to. And I did. It was very important to me and it helped me a lot last year, when it came out and I was listening to it. And it just happens to be like super like catchy. Like it's just such a well put together album that I can't fault it really much at all. It's one of my favorites last year. Phenomenal job from Lil Nas. Looking forward to seeing what he does next. Melior by Ghost, a phenomenal metal album that came out like at a time when I think this was super necessary, around like 2013, when like this was really kind of the peak of where we were at in this genre at the time. Banger after banger with its alt metal jives, clean vocals all the way through, but a very satisfying vocalist effort. Great stuff. I really can't think of much wrong with this. Listen to the deluxe version because it has Square Hammer on it, which is a great track. Also, you got like Absolution and Circe. The opening two tracks are so good. He is so great. Like that's the thing. Like it knows its pacing, and I think that's super impressive that a lot of metal albums can take more advice from. Wish We Were Here by Pink Floyd to me is their best work. Some great emotional instrumental epics along with their to me kind of haunting vocals and ballads all combined with prog rock classics. Like it's classic for a reason. I think Wish You Were Here is a 10 out of 10. Rise Radiant is really the only Caligula's horse that I felt like I could put on here. It's the one that hit me the hardest. I think it's the most consistent. Maybe that's because it's most accessible, but I don't think so. I think it's just a masterpiece of what they're able to do congealed in an album that works really well. It's so thematically concise, so thematically engaging, and I can't fault it in any way. I think Rise Radiant is a masterpiece of a band who knows exactly what they are, what they want to produce, and did it. It's a fantastic prog metal album about something very wholesome. It's the vocalist like being so like happy and content with being a father. Like he's so proud of his daughter. He feels like he talks about like how he feels satisfied in like his life knowing that like he has like another generation after him, Like it's so cool. It's so cool to see that being like just exemplified through something raw as like prog metal, and it works really well and it just sounds amazing too, so. Francis the Mute by the Mars Volta. Probably, I think that there's a lot to be gained from this Mars Volta track, or album rather. I think that a lot of people can get more out of it maybe than the other Mars Volta that I put on here. I think it's supremely solid as more of a prog rock epic album. It is longer. It contains their 30-minute magnum opus, Cassandra Gemini, which, like it or not, is just a phenomenal track, along with things like Elvia Vasquez, Miranda, a little more of that Latin tinge, not just with like the Spanish vocals, but a little bit more of embracing the prog epic instrumentals. It feels more like a prog rock band here. And I think for the most part, they pull it off well. I think it's a little bit inconsistent. I think it can drag at certain times. But for the most part, if like 23 minutes of your 33-minute song are banging, it's probably still like a fucking like banger through and through. Don't have much to fault with Francis the Mute. I think it's a phenomenal album. Stupid Dream. I think I've spoken before that this is the album, if you want someone introduced to Porcupine Tree, you show them this album. This is the first album a new fan should listen to. I think it's incredibly solid. I think it's incredibly accessible. It's their transition period from psychedelic into alt rock into more prog metal rock, all with that prog rock hinge underneath. And I think it works so well. I think it's so consistent. I think its peaks stay high the entire time. This is no rehearsal, piano lessons, even less. Tinto brass. I can keep going. It's so good. I think its messaging is very clear, very engaging, very easy to go along with. I really can't fault Stupid Dream enough, or I can't fault it at all. It's so good. I love this album. All right, the album everyone shits on, and I'm gonna get if this video was ever seen by some invested music critic, I would be instantly invalidated because of saying this. But I like 10,000 Days, and I never really understood why people don't like that. Is it because there's not a ton of thematic consistency, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess not, but I can't help it when I'm listening to the whole thing over and over again, enjoying the wild ride that the instrumentals, the vocals have taken me. If it sounds shallow, I guess, but I love almost every track on here to death. Vicarious, Jambi, 10,000 Days, Rosetta Stone. It's so good. To me, it's just so consistent, so concise, and it just nails a lot of what it goes for, even if that does ring a little shallow. I think just as a prog metal album, it sounds phenomenal. But that's just me. All right, top 40. Million Town, a phenomenal prog rock album in the mid-aughts from, I think it's a supergroup, I forget, from Frost. Oh, just some phenomenal prog rock chops that we really didn't see any of in the mid-aughts. It's fantastic going all the way through. The vocals are standing, the synths, the mellotron. Oh, it takes me back. It's so good. I love this album. Oh, okay, I'm the pretentious Radiohead fan who says Kid A is their best work. And, that's very understandable if you don't think that. I think OK Computer could easily put it your number one. In Rainbows, I could see you putting it your number one. For me, it's Kid A. I love the ambient vibes it goes for. I love the electronic vibes it goes for. I love the risks that it takes. I love that it feels very consistent all the way through as an album. And this is an album rating. I can see if you were judging it by singles, what I could put on a playlist, Kid A wouldn't rank that high, but as a consistent album from beginning to listen, man, Kid A is where it's at. Kid A is where it's at, and for me, it's gonna be where it's at for Radiohead. Everything, the dopamine and serotonin that goes in my brain the second everything in its right place comes on, uncomparable. So good. Discovery by Daft Punk, again, just a consistent masterpiece from beginning to end. House at its peak, and that's 2 songs in, and then it stays at that peak all the way through. Not sure, yeah, there's an anime movie tied to it that I really do like, but on its own, the album is still fucking 10 out of 10 phenomenal. It's House at their best, it's Daft Punk at their best, it's Discovery. There's not much more that needs to be said. Near by Keiichi Okabe and Eminem Evans. I was very on the fence about this because I didn't know if it would fit as a complete album, but to me, there's so many iconic tracks. Get the fuck back here, we'll talk to you later. But to me, it's so iconic. It means so much to me. The entire soundtrack has just become so ingrained in my life. I love Nier. I think it's a musical feat, just not like a video game OST feat. I think this is a musical accomplishment with Nier between Keiichi Okabe and Emmy Evans, and it shows. It's phenomenal the whole way there. It's just the instrumentals, the choir, the vocalists. Oh, it's just transports you to this messed up world in such a beautiful way. It's so hard to describe, but I love this soundtrack. 13th Step. There was a while where this was my favorite Perfect Circle album. I think it's very consistent. It knows what it wants to do. It's a little bit less heavy and with its alt rock nature, a little bit less metally. But songs, like The Noose, Blue, Vanishing, Weak and Powerless, The Package, banger after banger. I think it follows a little bit off in the second half, and that's kind of a trend with Perfect Circle albums, but this, when it's hitting, I wouldn't be I would when it's hitting and I'm listening to it, I wouldn't be listening to anything else. It's so good. Addicted is just a completely like a solid like every single is like a 9.5 out of 10 on like your 10 track album, then it's basically a 10 out of 10. Like how can you complain with that consistency of like banger after banger after banger? Like I can find something memorable about each song. It's Devin Townsend like truly letting loose what he wants to do, and I love it. I just love it. I disagree more by Poppy, and they're like, oh, you just like, I disagree because Poppy decided to be more industrial metal for some reason. And I'm like, yeah, and she killed it. It's so good. Every single on here is just so heavy and hard, and it sounds so great. I love it. I'm adding more on here. I know this is not the album artwork for it, but I'm adding more on here because there are some bonus tracks that are phenomenal as well. But this is just such a consistent album of Poppy going hard, and it's great. I love her vocals on it. I love the instrumentals she went with. It's great. It's such a fucking amazing album. Fish Out of Water by Chris Squire. A lot of definitely the best solo work from a Yes musician. Able to just both nail sort of prog rocky with this sort of like almost jazzy, fusiony vibe, fantasy like. It's so ethereal. It feels like a I don't know, like a 50s Disney movie sometimes, where it just like it seems so airy. But it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful and passionate, and it just feels like so much weight went into it. Like you can feel the energy that Chris Squire put into this from a bassist. I think he's great vocally. Like from the not lead vocalist of Yes, he sounds amazing, and the instrumentals kill. It's great. No one's heard of Ashes Divide, the solo project in the mid-aughts by Billy Howardell, the only album released under the name, the second half of Perfect Circle. And he killed it here. I think it's just a consistent mesh of good, heavier alt metal that, like, to me, I can't complain about. It's so consistent. It works so well. It's a little bit, I've described the genre that it's contained in numerous times on this list, but it just does everything a little bit better, a little bit more consistently, and it's a little bit more memorable. Crack the Sky by Mastodon is still my favorite Mastodon one, pretty much no question. I think thematically it's the most consistent. I love its long form pieces so well, so much. I love the little lead motifs in those long form pieces. I love the metallic riffs that make it feel like a consistent album all the way through. Oblivion right into the Last Baron is just like no time at all. Nothing, no time passes from the beginning to that. It's so easy to keep going. I'm going to take a drink before these last few albums. Okay. 10 out of 10s only from here on. Ready? Masterpieces. Masterpieces! We got Selling England by the Pound by Genesis. A fantastic prog rock classic that I don't think they liked at the time, I remember reading. But to me, this is so just imagines whatever I love about prog rock. These epic soundscapes, these accompanied by beautiful vocals, accompanied by just these long-form storytelling concepts that just keep flowing all the way through. It is Genesis at their peak. It's prog rock at its peak in a lot of instances. I love this album. But we're topped with another prog rock staple. I do be liking Red, as Red is my favorite King Crimson album. I love its tinge of metal on top of its prog rock era. It's so goes so hard. It feels so fresh. It feels so enjoyable. I can't help but put a smile on my face whenever I hear the title track, Fallen Angel, One More Red Nightmare. It's just so catchy. It's such a great example of what they're capable of in a way that you don't expect for this period of time. I think it's so ahead of its time. It's so masterful in what they're able to do. I can't help but love it. King Gizzard and Lizards and Nonagon Infinity. Fantastic, grungy, garage rock vibes that just keeps flowing. It keeps giving. It feels like a masterpiece. Like, it feels like this masterpiece from wildly creative musicians that are capable of so much, and it just feels like they're giving it their all here to create this consistent, like, overarching, looping epic that works so well. My favorite Dream Theater album, Metropolis Part 2, I think it's a little bit more consistent than Images and Words. I think it just creates that epic vibe, wacky time signatures and all, wacky metal soundscapes. I love it. I love it from beginning to end. I think it works really well as, like, the 90s progressive metal album. Plaza of a Distant Crowd. Not many people I know have heard of Vola, but for me, this album is like such a great gateway to that genre, where it's just great, compelling, progressive, new progressive alt rock that just really keeps you sucked in. You can enjoy any single on their own or as the whole album consistently. Really carried me through a lot. Was great to have in the background for so many things. I love it. Drink the Sea, as we mentioned earlier with Sea Without Eyes, this was such a iconic album for me. Growing up, high school especially, I think it's just still filled with banger after banger. I think it's so consistent. I think it knows exactly what it wants to be and nails every part of that. I think it's a fantastic first effort from the Glitch Mob. Probably my favorite Glitch album, I guess you could say. One of my favorite, just solid instrumentals all the way through electronically. Can't get enough of the Glitch Mob. Nevermind by Nirvana. Yeah, we're not, I'm not going to try it like, yeah, it seems obvious. I think it's a little bit, people say it's overrated, but I think it's like, it's rated that for a reason. It's Nevermind. It's so good. It melds grunge with pop, with punk. It's so good for a reason. It's because it's so good. It's unabashedly just still one of the best, albums of the 90s, and I think it's a 10 out of 10 for a reason. Oh no! I messed them up. All right. This is not Pitfalls. This is the Congregation. We have the Pitfalls up here. I hope they're not swapped. That would be unfortunate. But this is the Congregation. Pull it up if you want. This is not Pitfalls. Will be coming later, but the Congregation is probably their best, Leprous' best raw prog metal album that just feels so chaotic. Great energy beyond it in terms of what it's able to dish out in terms of its metal flows, its metal vibes. It feels so consistent in that style. They use their guitars like percussion instruments, is how I describe it, and it fits so well. It's so heavy. I love the Einar's vocals. Phenomenal. Yes, this album, I loved it at first, and it's only gotten better. I think Fear Inoculum is Tool at pretty much almost their best. Like, I think it's basically 6 long-form tracks with a little filler in between, but each of those tracks is a masterpiece. Tempest, Invincible, Descending, Calling Voices, Pneuma, the title track, incredible. It's so good, and I think it's legit Tool at their musical peak. I can't get tired of it. I don't get the complaints. The Raven That Refused to Sing. Another thing, I don't really get the complaints with this. I think it's a fantastic jazz fusion mixed with prog rock. Really amazing concept. Album mixed with 6 singles, a great format that worked really well for this type of track, where it's just a bunch of like 6 ghost stories told hauntingly, told by someone who knows their craft. Fantastic stuff by Steven. The Mantle by Agalok. Now this is that grungy metal, grovelly, but it's like, it's so like ethereal, so ambient that just, it carries it all the way through. I can't get tired of this album. I think it works really well. You gotta like hear it to believe it, but it just flows so well. I Vigilante by Crippled Black Phoenix is just 6 of their best songs, and that's it. Like, it's, I mean, that sounds obvious, but it's just these rock ballads followed by a little bit of jazz, a little bit of metal, a little bit of alt rock in there that flows so well, that just like gets me so excited to hear, like, there's like the flow of each song is just perfect each time, gets me so invested in their music, gets me so amped. It's great. The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails, it's just, I mean, yeah, it is the, quintessential of the industrial rock vibe. It is 9 Inch Nails still, I think, at their best. I love the whole flow of the album. I love the consistency. I love the standout singles. I think Trent Reznor brings his A game in all of his vocals and the production. I mean, I don't like. It's hard to sound. It's hard to sound like this album meant a lot to you without sounding like insane. But I mean, as someone with like depression and was struggling with a lot, this like it relate. I was able to relate to it, not in that I wanted to do crazy shit, but in the fact that like, oh, I kind of get it. You know, I get what he's talking about. You know, and it meant a lot. And it's also just goes really hard, so that's kind of cool. Spiritual Instinct by Alcest. The last two Alcest albums have been masterpieces in Black Gaze. Like, Niche and his friend, I forget his name, are gods. Like, I don't know how they do what they do in terms of their vocals, in terms of their soundscapes that they create with guitars, but it's just on full display here with Spiritual Instinct and previously with Kodama. But yeah, I don't really have much more to say than that. It's Black Gaze at its peak. It's black metal at its peak, in my opinion. I think that's the best subgenre. I love this album. I love everything it does. We're Here Because We're Here. I didn't really think too much of this album at first, but it has grown on me so much. With its singles, with its production, with that first entry into the neo-progressive prog. I love this album. I love it. I think it has a little bit of a valley in the beginning, in the middle, but that is more than made up for with a phenomenal beginning, a phenomenal ending. Can't say enough good stuff about We're Here Because We're Here. Yeah, Mir Denoms is my favorite once again. I think it's just so in your face in a good way. I think it's so aggressive. I think it's so... it nails a lot of its harsh beats in ways that seem like... It just seems so perfect. It seems so perfect in a way it's like, I don't need anything more than this right now. I can just listen to Mir Denoms and it gets me. It gets, like... It has the harsh metal tinge. It has vibes that just ring true all the way through. I love so many singles. I think similar to 13th Step, it falls a little bit in the second half, but that first half is phenomenal. The second half is still pretty good. But man, I could listen to this album any day of the week. And that's what you'll see a lot in this like top 20. Is like these top 20 I could listen to anytime, anywhere. 10 out of 10 masterpieces. I think they're fucking phenomenal. And Fragile by Yes, we're seeing the first of the top two, in my opinion, Yes albums. Fragile is just so consistent. It's so many good tracks, so many good tracks, so much of peak prog, so much of peak Yes, of just them proving of why I think they're my favorite classic prog rock. They're my favorite classic rock band is Yes, and they show it a lot, I think, mostly on this album. I think if you want to get into this, start with Fragile. Want to get into Yes, or probably classic prog rock, start here. If you like this, you'll like it all. If you don't like this, you probably won't like any of it. But I think it just works wonders. I think it's so popular for a reason. It became a meme for a reason. And Cannot Erase, my favorite Steven Wilson album. I love it as a concept piece. I think it's a master of him shifting into his prog pop direction. Before, I think it got a little too much on the prog pop side of things, which I didn't really vibe with. But I think this, where it's still a mixture of the prog rock, art rock, a bit, it really flows phenomenally. I think every track flows so well into the next. The production is absolutely stellar. I think this flows well into closure and continuation, honestly. This is a good base of what Steven Wilson's best at. And I've only loved it more over time. Okay. So this is very high. This is very high for June for Sewer Slut. As we talked, I've given my whole spiel back on Schizophrenia Simulation of what I think about June, and it's hard to deny. This has a lot of history. I'm not going to talk about it here, but there's a lot of history behind this album, and I still think that this album came from a place of love. I still think this album came from, and I know that because of how it helped me. This album is the closest thing an album's done to like saving my life. To like making me feel... Albums have made me feel not alone before, but this made me feel like things were okay. This made me feel like... It gave me insight of how people would feel if I was gone. How people feel about me. And it made me realize what I meant to others. And that helped me so much when this album came out. On top of that, it is 90 minutes long of the most emotional breakcore I've ever heard, of the emotional sound selection. It is 90 minutes, but every time I put it on, it is the fastest 90 minutes I will ever hear. It goes by like that. It is incredible what this album accomplishes to me. It is an emotional tour de force that hits me every time. I love every minute of it. I can't get enough of it. And that's all there is to it. Moving on into Fear of a Blank Planet, the most prog metal-y Porcupine Tree album. I think it's the only album I call 100% prog metal from Porcupine Tree. And I think a lot of people have like disliked it because they feel it's so on the nose. It's like, oh, what if phones but too much album? And I don't think it's like that. I think it's pointing out some like these like tech vices and like millennials and Gen Z of what they're going through, but it really doesn't seem condescending. It really doesn't seem like a put down. It's like, oh, you kids have all these and you're getting sucked in. It feels like a sympathetic cry. Like we know it's shitty. We know life sucks. Like we know life sucks. There is a bit of an edgy vibe to that, but it's a lot more like we know what all this tech and vices do to you, and we're sorry about that, you know? And I don't think that even really dates it that much. I think that's still relevant. But on top of that, I think it's just a masterpiece of a prog metal album. I think it's got some of the best instrumentals these performers have ever put on. The title track is one of my favorite songs ever. Anesthetize is up there. The last two tracks are just phenomenal as well. It wholeheartedly deserves a spot. Into the top 10 we go. Lateralis. Yep, it's still the best Tool album in my eyes. I think it's just the best structurally, a masterpiece of prog metal. Still flows just as well as it did like 2 decades ago. Phenomenal of work by Tool as masters of their craft. Not much more to say on it. I just think it just works so consistently. Kodama, the other half of the Spiritual Instinct half. This one hit me like a truck when I first heard it. I was like, whoa, it was literally like a music can sound like this moment. And it has like kept me enraptured ever since. It's the peak of black gaze to me, the peak of black metal, one of the best metal albums I've ever heard, period, full stop. An entrancing soundscape after entrancing soundscape. Please listen to this album, it's so good. The Money Store, like, again, music can sound like this, and it enraptured me ever since. It's still, to me, the most consistent Death Grips album where I would listen to any song on its own, and I'd listen to the album on, like, entirety, like, flip-flop between. It's so good, such a masterpiece of what they were capable of. And I think still are, but to me, I think they nailed it. They nailed it on The Money Store. I think every song after another is just peak. Weather Systems, my favorite Anathema record. One of the prettiest rock albums you ever hear. A complete tour de force of emotions. Ride that neo-prog high all the way through. It feels ethereal, and because it's meant to just transport you and elevate you, and it feels incredible. In Absentia, my second favorite Porcupine Tree album, for good reason. I think it is probably we're going back. It is probably their most mainstream album. It is the one that got them the most attention, and for good reason. It is a standout concept piece. It is a fantastic blend of prog rock and prog metal with banger after banger. Trains is probably one of my favorite songs ever. Sound of Music, Wedding Nails, there's just Heart Attack and a Lay-By. It's so emotional, it's so good, it's so raw. It feels like veterans in their craft doing what they want to do and showing that they can be masters at it. Here we go, number 5 is The Loused and the Comatorium, my favorite Mars Volta album. To me, it's like Francis the Mute, but a little bit more concise, a little bit more dense, a little bit more consistent, but still an emotional gut punch all the way through. It's incredible to listen to. The guitars on it are wonderful. I don't know how they get the instrumentals to sound like the way they do, and I don't know how Cedric gets his voice to sound the way he does, but fuck, man, it works beautifully, and the concept album is, like, so emotional, so gut-wrenching. Ugh, I love it to pieces. I love this album to pieces. I could listen to any song on it, similar to, mentioned previously, but I could listen to any song on its own. I could listen to it all the way through, and they're both phenomenal. Pitfalls by Leprous. Sorry, we reused the same title. Leprous moved into their direction of prog rock over just pure prog metal, and they nailed it. They perfected it. It is enrapturing, emotional vocals from Einar that he wrote himself that work really well as a concept album that spoke to me, reached out to my soul. I loved it. So passionate, so engrossing. Every single track flows well into the next one until it builds up all the way through to being this solemn message that I listen to over and over again. I love this album so much. I think they just nailed prog rock immediately, as opposed to just prog metal, and I think it's phenomenal. No Now by Clarence Clarity. Yeah, it's this high for the reason that it's in a league of its own. It's so on its own. There's no album quite like No Now by Clarence Clarity. I don't think there ever will be an album like this. It's funk played by bees. It's entropy played by the devil. It's so much fun, yet it feels so chaotic, and it feels like it doesn't work until it loops back around to working. Sometimes. And the other times, it's just catchy as hell. With a Clarence Clarity with his eerie, uncomfortable in a good way vocals that just stun me every time. I can't get over. There's nothing quite like it, and it's so hard to describe it. But it's like, it's long, but it doesn't feel like it. It's so consistent. Every track is just a banger on top of a banger. It does everything it's out to do. It's Clarence Clarity letting out every creative bone in his body that he wants to. Every creative thought, every single thing he ever wanted to say in music is just tied in this album. And to me, it makes it a masterpiece. Only overshadowed to me by two other works. Close to the Edge by Yes. To me, it's how is this number 2? It's 35 minutes long. There's only 3 songs on it. But those 3 songs are like 11 out of 10s. And some of my favorites, period. And You and I is a contender. Like, if someone came up to me in the street and said, what is your favorite song? I would probably say And You and I by Yes. I think that this is a masterpiece of a prog rock album. There's no filler. There's no fluff. Sure, that makes it a bit shorter. But man, that's 35 minutes of your life always well spent. Listening to the title track, a masterpiece of mellotron, of instrumentals, of vocalists. Like, it's crazy how invested it is. It's crazy how emotional you can get into this. It's a roller coaster, but like one you're happy to get on every time. And I feel myself like tearing up every time I listen to it. It is a phenomenal prog rock tour de force that I can never get enough of. I think it is a mastercraft of an album. I think it is perfect. That is only overshadowed by one just for maybe personal reasons. For those who know me, it's not a surprise, but for those who don't, I love this album. This album to me is perfect. To me, this album is a perfect melding of prog rock and prog metal from my favorite band. This is an enrapturing, haunting concept album. Every track flows into the next perfectly. Every track on its own I could listen to, and I would say it's a 10 out of 10. I love every minute of this. Every hour, like every time I decide to spend an hour to listen to Deadwing, it's an hour well spent. It is an hour that I love. This album means so much to me. I grew up with it. I will keep listening to it. I love every track on it. I'm trying to think of more things to say, but I've said most of those adjectives already on this list. And a lot of what I've said about previous albums can be said about this one as well. Maybe even more so. Deadwing by Porcupine Tree, to me, is my perfect album. It is a desert island disc I would take with me. I couldn't say enough nice things about it. And I love it. It is my favorite album of all time. And with that, I am exhausted. I have talked a lot, and I think I will end it there. But thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in if you have. This might go up on YouTube later. We'll see. I like the auto switch back. But thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.